a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. I'm a never Trump guy. 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 I'm a never.
Wow, my face is exactly as expressive as I feel because, oh my God, are we going to take psychic damage today? Good morning to you. Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be reviewing the infamous and famous Sam Seder and Hasan Piker debates today. I do expect to take a lot of psychic damage today. We don't even have time for the news because the Sam Seder debate is an hour long. Add in my commentary, it's going to be even longer. Then the Hasan Piker debate, I think, is like seriously 3 or 4 hours. And then add in my commentary, it's going to be even longer. So I expect to get through the Sam Seder debate today. I expect to get through part of the Hasan Piker debate just because it's going to be such a large cultural touchstone. I will probably finish it up tomorrow because the truth is that I think as the debate wore on, like increasingly psychotic things were being said. So this is Twitch and YouTube alternative media. This is Twitch and YouTube politics. So even if we feel incredibly stupid by the time that we're done with this, it's necessary. Unfortunately, it's wildly necessary. So Sacred Snow says all the psychic damage. Indeed. Everybody take your Advil, drink your coffee, do your stretches, drink some water, do what you need to do. And then John says, I feel sorry for Sam. I don't. I'll tell you why in a moment. So it's effectively because of some of his rhetoric during the debate is exactly what I would be critical of if I was Ethan Klein. But let's go ahead and do an intro and get into it. The latecomers are just going to have to deal with coming in partway through. They can watch the VOD if they want to, but we got a lot of content to get through, and it's going to be a tough. It's going to be a tough day. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'll make it fun, but it's going to be a tough day. So, Harmonic Fox says, good morning, or good Monday morning, everyone. Here's to another excellent week. True. We're on stroke watch, guys. Yeah, seriously, this might be it. This might be the one that does me in. So, oh shit, really? Yes. So, anyways, let me go ahead and give a little bit of an intro and a backstory before we get started. So, hi, guys. My name is Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. I'm a part of the Valor Media Network, which is first responders, law enforcement, military guys creating content that's hopefully a little bit better for the human soul. Unfortunately, I am the resident pig wrestler, and therefore I exclusively contend with content that is very bad for the human soul because it's popular. And for today, I actually have a treat for you. For the first segment, it's going to be a gentleman by the name of Sam Seder. He runs the Majority Report. Also, I think he's a voice actor on Bob's Burgers. He's the health inspector from Bob's Burgers. So he's kind of a well-to-do, I think, progressive and liberal commentator who goes a little bit too lefty sometimes. And also, I think more importantly, a voice actor for Bob's Burgers. He was invited onto the Ethan Klein show, Ethan Klein being a wildly popular commentary live stream podcast, because he is a anti-Zionist Jew. And Ethan Klein can be described as like moderately Zionist, like Zionist in the way that, I don't know, 90% of the planet is. And Ethan Klein's been catching a disproportionate amount of flack because he used to be pretty progressive, but now he's not progressive enough and he's being cannibalized. So with all of that being said, let's bring in our characters. Let's go ahead and add Mr. Ethan Klein and Mr. Sam Seder to our screen, and we will get cracking as soon as I click the right buttons. I almost had it. I was almost smooth.
Dude,
I feel like it's real for sure.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the show, Mr. Sam Seder.
Oh my God, it's Sam Seder! What a nightmare!
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
How have you been, Sam, since we ruined Steven Crowder's life together? Nice to see you again.
I've been feeling very badly for him.
Yes,
over
we're
the
all.
years.
It's a tragic loss of a great career and so much potential.
For those of you who are unaware, I know that we have a lot of content to get through, but obviously part of the reason why we're here is for my commentary. Probably 2 or 3 years ago, who was it? So, God, why can't they literally just said it? Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder wanted to debate Ethan Klein. Ethan Klein does not fancy himself a debater. Sam Seder does. Sam Seder likes debates. He likes contentious conversations. And so they pulled an old switcheroo where Steven Crowder totally, in my opinion, wussed out because he showed up to debate Ethan Klein and then Sam Seder showed up. And then he was like, oh, well, this isn't what I agreed to. This isn't what I agreed to. Oh, you got tiny little beady eyes. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And he was saying all this like wild shit to Sam Seder. And it's like, bro, like in a debate, this is actually one of the things that bugs me about large media personalities. It's like in a debate, you should be able to stand on business. You should be able to back your arguments, and it shouldn't matter who you're arguing against because you believe in your stated positions. If you can't stand on business, what's the point in being in political commentary?
Yes, it is. Hey, are we live now?
We are live on the H3 channel. Yes.
I want to just start
No. N-Sort says intellectual property law. No. Israel-Palestine.
by sort of apologizing in that I sent you a DM on Twitter 6 months ago or something. I was just going through to find out, and I just realized you're no longer on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that
He
explains why I didn't hear back.
He may no. Yeah, I didn't see it. I wish I would have, but honestly, I don't know what to do because like I want to get off Twitter, but also it's kind of a pain because Twitter is the way that like I would reach out and speak to most people. But I also don't want to be on a platform that's like owned and perpetuates basically like Nazi shit. So
Yeah, this was yes, I understand that.
Yeah,
but I just wanted you to know I did reach out, and it was on me not to realize that. I just assumed he didn't want to respond, but
okay, well,
me.
That's nice to know that you reached out. I appreciate that. And the reason, I mean, obviously, people have been pushing for this conversation. I don't know if you know, like, the whole lore of it, the background of it. I
mean, this is all I know is that Hasan reached out to me sometime. I mean, I got in touch with you October 24th, and I said that I.
So Christian Blair says, at Valor Media Network, I mean this with all respect, but F your schedule and Valor's lack of notifications. Listen, I'm trying to do 9:30 to 2:30 every single day. Unfortunately, I was traveling over the weekend in order to do Tim Pool on Friday, and then my wife had a routine but necessary medical appointment. So it's, I blame YouTube as well, but it is what it is. We do what we got to do, and we do what we got to do to survive. But I appreciate the sentiment that you want to be here every day, and sometimes it's not the easiest. Bud123 says, hey, man, I don't know why you like torturing yourself listening to Hasan. Well, he is, like it or not, the world's largest political streamer. So unfortunately, in some ways, we have to contend with him because, what is it? It's like Hasan, Destiny, Vosh in levels of size and streaming relevance. There's bigger YouTubers. There's not bigger live streamers.
I was meaning to reach out for a couple of weeks, so I assume it was sometime in early October. And my thought we were just going to do this off air, but my understanding is that you and he were getting into it, and you felt like because he wasn't Jewish, he didn't have a perspective on this, and that's why he suggested that you speak to me. I don't speak for all Jews, just to be clear.
Right.
I speak for myself as a in any form.
Well, Sam, allow me to speak for all Jews, if I may, today.
Please.
No, but actually, I mean, that's a total mischaracterization, which is kind of my problem with Hasan, which we can get into if you want. We don't even have to talk about Hasan. But basically, what I told him was that I was citing polling data that shows that about 70 to 80% of diaspora Jews have some kind of positive feelings towards the state of Israel. And he was disagreeing with me. And I mean, this is available by polls, readily available by Pew Research just last month, showing that, and I don't know if you agree with that or not, I can pull it up, but 72% of diaspora Jews have some type of at least positive feelings about the state of Israel.
So the reason why this is like so necessary as a part of this argument, I know we're setting it up and I'm going to let these people articulate their own viewpoints. However, I don't want to pull a lefty streamer and just watch them talk for hours on end without commentary. The reason why is because this is the base level of the pro-Zionist argument. There's like, let's put it to an extreme. The extreme is greater Israel, that Israel should occupy all territories from the Nile to the Euphrates River. So from Egypt to Iraq, it should be Israeli territory, and everybody else can either be subservient or get the fudge out, right? Let's make that the most extreme Zionist position possible, okay? Then there's probably somewhere in the middle where they think that they should occupy the West Bank and they should occupy Gaza, which you can still view as messed up because there's millions of Palestinians who live in those territories. And then there's the Israel has a basic ability to exist, and that's a good thing for Jews to have a homeland. And that's like the very basic entry-level 0 or 1 Zionist perspective. So Ethan gets treated like he's a 10, but he's a 1 on a scale of how Zionist a Jewish person can be. And the truth is that he's pointing out that 72% of international Jews are a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10. Celeste Plantagenet, here to incur the wrath of the gods, is here again and gives us a $1.50 super sticker. Thank you, Miss Plantagenet. I hope you stir up some smack in chat. Casey makes an excellent point saying that like the stream. Yes, please like the stream. It is free. You don't have to give donos. They are appreciated, but they're never required. And then Casey says, Connor, why are you hiding in the dark like a Sith Lord? It's not May 4th. So what I need to do, I need $50. I am getting another paycheck today, but I need $50 to just close out this window because the Floridian sun is right past this window. So it, blinds me out on one side. I do have a very nice lighting system. I just need to drop cash, go to IKEA, and pick it up. So I will. Don't worry about it. And Miss Plantagenet helped out with that purchase. So thank you kindly. Megan Zero says, remember everyone, the dislike extensions are BS. Please stop using it as a metric. Yeah, relatively speaking. So, all right, let's continue. It's so stupid the way Ethan gets treated, man. Yeah, he even says some things that are like fairly anti-Zionist in these debates that even I wouldn't co-sign. And people still act like he's a neo-Nazi, but for Israel.
I was stating that fact to him, and he was saying that I was wrong. And I said, "Who are you to talk about this?" I did not say that I only listen to Jewish people, which is a little bit of presumptuous and a little insane.
No, I don't think that's not what I took him to say. But yeah, I mean, as long as that's irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I haven't seen that poll. I've seen ones that have said that they have a connection. They feel a connection, either strong or somewhat.
Yeah.
Which is different than positive per se.
So
but regardless, I mean, I think if I don't know your upbringing at all, but I mean, certainly my upbringing, my Hebrew education was, I would say 1/3 Holocaust, and I'm older, and so this was in the 70s, 1/3 into the 80s, 1/3 Holocaust, 1/3 Israel, 1/3 Hebrew, like Hebrew and Jewish culture, and I certainly feel a strong connection to Israel, but I wouldn't call it positive these days.
Sure. I think what the poll attempts to is basically, if you ask Hassan or a lot of people on the left, I think an emotional attachment is the way to describe this. So it's like, if you think
I certainly have an emotional attachment, and it's not, but it's not, I wouldn't describe it as positive.
This isn't the one, is it, Dan? There's the one that shows 73% of diaspora Jews. Anyway, it doesn't really matter regardless. Basically, I want to flesh out my ideas, my thoughts, because I'm being characterized by Hassan and a lot of his cohorts as being, a Zionist, being pro-Israel, being a Israel apologist, being a genocide supporter, being a baby killer, being married to a baby killer, etc., right? My wife is Israeli. I don't know if you know that. So basically, I would like to just take the opportunity to explain my ideas, what I think about Israel, and you can tell me what you think, because.
So I know this isn't completely historically parallel, but I think there's some emotions that are parallel. So I just want to explain it real quick. I'm ethnically Irish. I have some affinity for the homeland of Ireland because that's where my people come from. And I have this like ephemeral fantasy of what it's like to live in Ireland, both in the past and present. So if there was a situation, I'm trying to make it equivalent. So Ireland would be, the Israel in this scenario. So let's say that Ireland was putting incredible amounts of pressure on Northern Ireland, which is the, UK occupied part of Ireland. And then there was a terrorist attack by, Protestant militias that lashed out into mainland Ireland and then killed like 1,000 civilians, right? And in response, the Irish government was just like blanket bombing Northern Ireland. Then, of course, like you're stuck in the middle where you're like, hey, I don't want Irish civilians to be massacred on virtue of being Irish. I do think what they're doing in Northern Ireland is messed up, and I understand that there might be a logical political backlash, but there are people in the United Kingdom and there are people in all of the world who are arguing that Ireland should effectively be wiped off of the map and that because of what they're doing in Northern Ireland, they should all be genocided. And since I have a historical tie to that land, I'm not willing to concede that my homeland should be butchered in order to appease this international mob of people who hate Ireland. That's what I think would be like most akin to me, and I can completely sympathize with it. If that was the exact situation, I think I would have Ethan Klein's exact position. Casey from Long Island says, Irish Chad stay winning, British cell seething. Well, IRA did some messed up stuff too. Christian Valera says, we'd have to go back to the 1920s for that example to be semi-historically accurate. Sure. I'm not trying to make it like 1-to-1. I'm just trying to explain why I'm sympathetic to Ethan's line of argumentation, because I can sympathize with it conceptually as an American. I'm more American than I am anything else. I don't have this like super strong devotion to the homeland of Ireland. However, if you ask me about geopolitical affairs in the homeland, of course, I'm going to sympathize with the people that I'm more like culturally and historically affiliated with. Civilians aren't valid military targets unless they attack soldiers. Bud123, you say that, but we're going to see some wild statements coming out from Hasan Piker in particular. Yeah, we already got genocided. Yeah, we already took our hits historically.
Apparently, I will only listen to other Jewish people. So finally, I can speak to someone whose opinion matters to me. So thank you. As the official sanctioned Jewish man, Sam Seder, everybody. 100% Ashkenazi? You ever taken one of those?
I haven't, but I'm quite sure I have some Sephardic Jewish ancestry too. So I would mix.
That's good.
Vilnius and Hungary, I think.
Good for you. I think that's always a good thing. My friend, I'm 99.3%. So that's my.
All right,
that's where my authority comes from.
I'll take your word for it.
So at any rate, let me start here by showing you a little context.
Oh, let me also just say, I got about an hour.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just get into it then. Here it is.
Les Plantagenet asks, hey, Connor, did you get the comment I sent to you on your Counterpoints channel on the Roman runaway soldiers talking about the gods? I could take a look at it. It sounds vaguely familiar, but if you want to retype it, I'll answer it for you here.
Not that it matters, but okay, whatever. So let's start here. Let's start with a little icebreaker here. I know we're both fans of Tim Pool. Okay, let's just enjoy this image together. Tim Pool recently had a wedding, and can you see? Can you see that?
Did he get married?
Well, I think he's attending a wedding.
Okay.
And he's very formally dressed, except he appears to be wearing a beanie.
I would. I'm aware of his beanie attachment.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought this was a fine look for our good friend Tim Pool there. Very good.
Nice suit.
Yeah. So well, let me ask you this: what have you?
Come on, guys, let's go.
You kind of like heard about me, because I mean I know that your colleagues have an opinion.
I got to be honest with you. I have not heard much. I have like, the only thing I really saw that came up in any of my mentions on Blue Sky, I'm also on Blue Sky, is just this issue about talking to me, and I had presumed that that was it, but I don't, like, look, from my perspective, I'm not, and I know that there's been, you mentioned in the email that there's been a lot of grief that you have taken, and I know that other people have also taken grief on all sides of.
Listen, just sharing because it's taken a while for these two Jewish gentlemen to get into it. If you ever start losing your hair and you have a decent head shape, I think pulling the Bruce Willis is the way to go. Okay. So you don't keep your crown and grow out your crown. You just buzz it, right? And you just buzz it every couple of days. That way, your head, you of course need like a decent head shape, but I think this is a perfectly acceptable aesthetic, right? This is probably the aesthetic that I would go for. Add in a beard. So I would have a beard and I would just buzz my head. Like all that finasteride that knocks off like 2 or 3 IQ points, all those like hair loss stuff. If you do it, God bless you. It's fine. You do what you need to do in order to feel comfortable in your own skin. But I think this is a perfectly acceptable aesthetic. So just sharing my thoughts while we're waiting for the Jews to actually get into the meat of the argument.
This, and, the personal aspects of this, and I don't believe that people. I don't actively attempt to deplatform people. I don't think people should do that. I don't think people should be swatted.
True, Razzle Cherry. True.
Or tried to be fired or whatever. Or have CPS sicked on them or any of that. I mean, I just don't think that's appropriate. I mean, I'm more interested in talking about my relationship to Zionism and my perspective on what Israel is doing and what is happening in Gaza. And
I totally agree. Let's just talk about the facts. Let me start by showing you this clip. So I've been actually talking about my feelings on the Israel-Gaza Palestinian dispute situation for a long time. I lived in Israel for 5 years as well when I was with my wife early on. Here's my position right after October 7th. And you can tell me if you have any, if you have any comments on any of my positions here. But this was this was from our episode a few days after October 7th. Yeah. Liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel. Okay. Listen, this isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it and many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs. Okay. They're led by Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal. Okay. He's made a coalition of the most radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hellbent on genocide, frankly, overtly. They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza, including the killing of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18. So when you bomb a building, the chances that you're killing children is pretty much 100%. Okay? It's fucking barbaric. It's unacceptable. It's disgusting. I've seen videos, I saw videos of Palestinian dads holding his dead 5-year-old daughter. I mean, I don't need to watch this part because it just gets a little too emotional. But I mean, so that was my take right after October 7th. And obviously that was coming off the end of me being I'm an Israeli citizen. The morning of October 7th, me and my wife were up at 3 a.m. as families were calling into news stations from their safe houses, people being burned alive with their families being murdered while on the phone with news. So coming off of that emotional shock, right, was this was my reaction. Now, I don't know if there's something Zionist or pro-Israel I said there, but maybe I don't understand.
I mean, I think much of what you said.
So hold on real quick before Sam interjects. I guess we have to bring the energy because these dudes aren't bringing it. That's okay though. They're warming up. I know that it gets spicier later on. So the thing about that is I have no problems being like descriptive about like Israel, effectively parts of it with Trump's backing, aiming to do what they would hope would be an ethnic cleansing in Gaza. So the whole conversation from Trump, it fits definitionally an ethnic cleansing of taking all of the Gazan Palestinians who are majority Muslim and then just moving them out of the area, grinding it down, bulldozing all of it, and then, replacing it with their own new buildings that'll be turned over to the state of Israel. That effectively was an argument that Trump was making a couple of months ago that I think might have even been too extreme for Israel. And so as a result, they backed off of that. But that's ethnic cleansing. And then we see all the time, at least on Twitter, I see the results of Israeli airstrikes all the time where, yeah, a building comes down, probably kills some Hamas fighters, but there's also dozens of other people trapped in the rubble. And like they're saying, some of them are children. So I think that Israel is so casualty averse where they do not want to lose any of their citizens in the conflict. What it does is it makes it so they kill a lot of civilians, a lot of collateral damage. They do talk about how precise they're being in reference to other modern wars. And I'm not surprised because technology has substantively improved over the past, 20, 30, even 50 years. So I'm not surprised by them having decent numbers compared to other modern conflicts. But that doesn't undead those children, right? So, is it more risky? Will you suffer more casualties if you send in ground forces mixed with armor in order to go toe-to-toe with Hamas? 100%, you're going to lose more people. Is that what they should do in order to minimize human casualties or civilian casualties as much as possible? Of course. Now that comes with its own challenges, and technically that can kill more people. But I think that instinctively, morally, it feels better to have troops who are on the ground making moral decisions in lines with the law of war than it does to just like, there's a Hamas militant in that building. Let's kill like 35 civilians in order to kill that one guy, right? So, I'm taking the IQ hit now. I cracked my skull as a kid and don't remember if there's a scar there and I have a big mole. We'll find out. Should have been a blowout. Hassan. Yeah, dude, Hassan getting owned by Ethan Klein is crazy pants. I did not have that on my 2025 bingo card. Cedar 100% say the far right do represent a lot of Israelis, probably. Well, yeah, but if you look at the arguments for that Baden Panada and Noah Samson they put polling up as far as like, do you support the current ongoing military operations in Gaza? Yes or no? Do you think that we should go further than we're doing right now? And it's probably like 80, 90% of Israelis support those operations. And so they would argue that, effectively there's broad Israeli support for military operations in Gaza, even after the crazy destruction that they visited on the location. The question is, what's next, right? Casey from Long Island says, and Dearborn still voted for him like the stupid Fs they were. Well, that's a crazy thing is, what was that infamous tweet? There was an infamous tweet from like a Muslim guy who was like, Gaza's talking now, B word. And he was talking about Kamala Harris. And it's like, when would Kamala Harris have ever greenlit an ethnic cleansing? That would have never happened under a Harris-Biden administration. But we have to pretend, for the sake of leftists, that Biden and Trump are indistinguishable, and also Harris and Trump are indistinguishable. It's absolute cope. And I think all those people should be bullied relentlessly on the internet. Sacred Snow asks, at Connor, are you going to cover your Tim Pool appearance? I refuse to support a Russian asset in Destiny Watch about 5 minutes, so I likely won't see it otherwise. Nah, to be honest, Sacred Snow, I understand, but it was kind of dry, not going to lie. We did debate it, but it was just Econo Boy and me hashing it out with economics and stuff. There's some funny moments, but it's not as big or dramatic as anything that we're going to be watching today. Sabian Green says, when you're half listening and hear Connor talking about undead children, yep. You gotta wake up. Otherwise the horrors of the world are gonna sneak up and surprise you. Bud123 says, doesn't Netanyahu support the Trump Gaza plan and said it was a bold idea? Is that the goal, or is it the case that he can't criticize the U.S. and Trump? I would say it's the fact that he can't criticize. I think I'll be looking more for actions than I will be for words, especially when it comes to the Trump admin.
Said was true. I'm not sure, frankly, if what we've seen Israel do in terms of Gaza is not broadly supported in Israel. I'm not seeing the body politic. I mean, I was doing a lot of interviews with Israeli reporters in earlier in 2023 about the protests against what Netanyahu was doing with the judiciary. And there was a question as to whether Israelis would see that this autocracy that Netanyahu was attempting to sort of impose on the country wasn't an extension of what was happening in places like the West Bank and in Gaza in some fashion, and more so the West Bank at that time. And so I think it's hard to make an argument. And look, I would make it's not a perfect analogy as to what's happening in this country, but when you talk about the Israeli population not having a problem with what's going on in Gaza, I don't see a lot of evidence of that. There's certainly, I would imagine, a percentage of Israelis, and I know some of them who think that Israel should stop its assault there, but I don't think I don't see a lot of evidence that a year and a half later, after you said those things, that this is not the character of the vast majority of Israeli society. I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced that they are as aware. I mean, I've talked to people who.
Oh, good God, Sam, come on. I'm going to fast forward them a little bit because, they basically, they need to warm up. Okay. It'll get spicy later on. But the point is that, in my opinion, I think Israel broadly supports the military operations, but this is the same thing with the United States and the war on terror. I'm not saying that the war on terror didn't have its critics very early on, but there was a genuine bloodthirst in the American people after 9/11, 2001, where we wanted to go overseas and kick some ass. And in Afghanistan, that momentum always stayed. There were always people who wanted to continue the war in Afghanistan in order to hunt down Al-Qaeda and hunt down Osama bin Laden. What happened, though, was when the Bush administration used that as a pretext in order to get into Iraq, there was more momentum, more pushback, because the case against Iraq from a jihadist perspective was infinitely weaker than Afghanistan. So we saw a blowback and we saw people coming out. Well, with Gaza, and with Hamas winning the election, with Hamas still maintaining some level of popular support amongst the civilian population there, with Hamas remaining in power, there's no Iraq-style distraction from the military campaign in Gaza. And so as a result, why would the Israelis back off? I understand that they want them to out of humanitarian concern and concern for the Gazan civilian population. I totally sympathize. But what's the logical or emotional reason that you go to an Israeli citizen and tell them, hey, it's time to just leave Gaza alone? Why would they ever do that? Casey from Long Island says, Sam is full of baloney here. There have been weekly ceasefire, bring back the hostage protests almost every week with tens of thousands of attendees. Yeah, I mean, that could be true, but even if 80% of the population still supports the Gazan military operation, that could still be hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So, yeah. Did you hear that the Israeli government approved a plan to conquer the Gaza Strip? I didn't. Not surprised. It's horrifying to me, but yeah. The statements by Gallant and others have been unhinged, but not surprising. Right. So what's the emotional and logical appeal to an Israeli? An Israeli says, October 7th was a deliberate and horrifying terror attack against me and my people. Why would I want to tolerate these people living on my southern border? As a result, we're going to go ahead and ethnically cleanse Gaza. You can do all the World War II style humanitarian appeals, but what do you actually, how do you convince them that they're wrong, right? How do you convince them that it's a bad idea? Israel pulled its settlements out of Gaza because it was a hornet's nest and land to protect its civilians. Not surprised. Then why do you not like YIMBY? NYC is a bad example, but LA could benefit from mixed use urban housing. Ved Sunil, I think I make the argument, you might be talking about the Tim Pool debate. I don't want to take this room right here that's on my screen that I'm pointing at with my clicker, that's only 1,500 square feet, and then chop it up into 3 smaller units and then force 3 people to live in an area that should only be lived in one person. I want to plan a city so that we have, decent amounts of mixed zoning so we can all live here. But Yimbys, through deregulation, they effectively just want to create human rats' nests, and I'm not interested in that. So, no animal practices war more than man. Celeste, I don't agree with you at all. Like this is the thing. We act like war is like this this human only thing, and yet like nature is at war constantly. Every single creature in God's kingdom wakes up and they are at war with their competitors. So I don't agree at all. Same thing with like ants. Ants like butcher each other in the trillions, you know. Ant wars are more costly to ant lives than human wars are to human lives. Now, if you want to say it's bad, I'm with you, but I don't think we're unique in the animal kingdom at all. Moving on.
Basically before the war started. And I think that the unfortunate, really tragic outcome of the war is how much it's jaded and radicalized, I think, people in Israel. It's really, I think people in Israel feel like isolated. They feel like, the sentiment in Israel is basically that the world wants, the country to disappear. And obviously, like that's a much more nuanced conversation. But
So Celeste Plantagenet that's perfectly okay, because honestly, it's more fun to argue with you about the nature of war and creatures than it is to let them warm up. So we're going to do that anyways. I'm going to one guy myself into oblivion, but out of instinct. Mankind does it in the name of expansion. Celeste, I would argue that our instincts are the things that motivate us towards war. So we're no different than human beings. There's no, or than the rest of the animal kingdom. There's no separation. Okay, like we are obviously the dominant species of the planet, so that's cool. But at the same time, like, you can watch a chimpanzee or an ape use tools. You can watch them have complex social interactions. You can watch ants conduct warfare. You can watch, ambush predators engage in ambush. You're kind of making this argument like, well, oftentimes they're doing it for food or survival. Well, I would argue that tribalism is 100% an instinct rooted in our, survivalist past. So has it gotten more complex? Absolutely. But is it the same instinct? In my opinion, yes. Ved Sunil says, I disagree with you on Yimby take, but it's all right with the rest of your opinions, so it's all right. All right, yeah. You don't have to agree on everything. I appreciate these videos so much. Please keep making them. Well, Emily, thank you for the comment. I do appreciate it. Let's continue.
Feeling there has definitely radicalized a lot since the war started. It's gotten a lot worse.
And I think, I think that gets to it to some extent. You have this wholesale slaughter. I was looking up, we killed in Iraq,
Uh-oh. Do you guys know where I'm going already? Do you know that I'm going to the Iraq body count project? I'll let him talk while I pull it up.
Depending on what numbers you want to look at. But, I think it's safe to say directly hundreds of thousands of people. But even...
So let's do all of Iraq, U.S.-led coalition forces, no Iraq forces. Let's go ahead and load it in. So if you take a look at, if you would be so kind as to take a look at your screen, right now is something called the Iraq Body Count Project. It's something that was originally created in order to keep track of, the deaths in the war in Iraq. And it was also created as a criticism of the United States military-industrial complex and all of its sins, okay? Because you can blame us indirectly for all of the deaths, okay? So if you take a look at this, we can see that 80, 90% most months of civilian deaths in Iraq were caused by Sunni and Shia militias butchering the hell out of each other. And so I actually wouldn't mind changing it to U.S.-led coalition forces. Do we get a total? I would love to get a total. But the point is that there's a tired talking point coming out of the left. I don't want Microsoft Office, thank you. There's a tired talking point coming out of the left that effectively says that the United States is the end-all be-all when it comes to deaths caused by jihadist organizations, and it's just not true. So That's the main point that I wanted to make. And then documented civilian deaths from violence. Further analysis of WikiLeaks Iraq war logs may add 10,000 civilian deaths. So let's go ahead and change this back to any perpetrators. Yeah. So any perpetrators is total 211,000, whereas the coalition forces are like 90% reduced compared to that total amount. And so you have to, multiply this by 0.2 or 0.1. So there's probably 10,000 to 20,000 deaths that are directly attributable to the United States, whereas 80 to 90% of them were caused by jihadist organizations. With that, I'll go ahead and let Mr. Sam Seder fib into your ear.
Like the number of children that we killed in Iraq, I think has been surpassed by what's happened in Gaza. And I think one of the things that
Yeah, my apologies. Well, QC John. So good afternoon, Connor and chat. Connor, you're my streamer, but your schedule sucks with no notifications. I don't have access to the back end in order to do community notifications. Otherwise, I literally would tell you guys that I'm going to be late today. I was late today for a good reason. My wife had to go for a routine but very necessary medical checkup at 10 in the morning. That's why we're starting late. And so my apologies. And then Celeste says, Plantagenet says, you're right. What do I know? I'm just a silly woman. No, Celeste. You are our favorite heathen defier of the gods, okay?
I find shocking is that the sense and look, I experienced this with family members, where the sense that there's a victimization, for instance, let's say on college campus of Jewish students. And I think that to look at what's going on, the totality of what's going on, and to perceive the victims of what's happening here to be the Israeli citizenry or Jews in this country, I think it just blows my mind. I mean,
two people can care about two things at once. Why should people?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
People who are uninvolved in the war, if they're being like victimized in a separate situation because of their Jewish identity, that's a problem, don't you think?
Oh, I do. But
you can care about two things. You can't be like, oh, these people are ridiculous for caring about anti-Semitism on college campuses because the war's happening. I mean, both we can care about two things.
100%.
And obviously one is way worse, right? One is way worse.
But that's the point. I mean, one is way worse. And what's happening in Gaza,
who should tolerate being discriminated against based on their identity? You know what I mean? Like, of course, who wouldn't react to that?
I don't think that people are. I don't think that people are being victimized. I mean, certainly, listen, anti-Semitism is real. It was real when I was a kid. There was many times I had pennies thrown.
This is like this dumb lefty point that I hate. I hate this dumb lefty point so aggressively, where it's like, Jewish students are getting harassed on American colleges, but anybody who perceives the Israelis as the victims, I think you're crazy. And the point is that genocide is far worse than the victimization of, Israelis. Okay, so I want you to think about this real quick. Okay, people in war and conflict can have like justifications for why they're doing things, and they can also recognize that things are bad. So, for instance, like I guarantee you, the Shia and Sunni militias had a reason for why they did what they did, and yet you won't see like a single argument from me saying that was good, right? That there's no arguments that the Shia and Sunni militias butchering each other was good, right? And so this is the horror show of this lefty logic where you can effectively justify like murder, you can justify rape, because it's not as bad as the other things, right? So hold on. I'm looking for a specific post, and I kind of have to give a trigger. I'm going to give a trigger warning, but I think it's important to show you what we're talking about, okay? Because Sam is in a studio in New York. Ethan Klein is in a studio in Los Angeles. Hasan Piker is in his home in Los Angeles. And so we are all insulated from this conflict, right? And so I want to give you a trigger warning. Literally look away, and I'll tell you when you can look at the screen again. But I'm going to show you what Sam is talking about as not being as bad as the Gazan genocide. Okay? So here we have 2 Hamas militants on the day of October 7th. They're inside somebody's home. They're in their living room. There's an unarmed man on the ground that they've executed. And they're putting their fingers up saying, you know, there's no God but God and Muhammad is his messenger. Okay? That's the first picture. This guy is not a combatant. He's not involved in conflict. He's not an IDF soldier. He might have been an IDF soldier in his youth, but they murdered this man. He is a victim. Regardless of the geopolitical situation, he is a victim. Next thing is, I think this girl was an IDF soldier, but she was kidnapped from her base, and she's hogtied and being walked around and basically ended up being one of the hostages taken by Hamas. And then she has, you know, trigger warning, she has blood on her pants where her butt and genitals are. Now, the argument from pro-Palestinian people is that, well, that's not sign of sexual abuse or torture. That's actually because there were other corpses in the back of the truck that she was being driven in. And so blood leaked into her pants from the other corpses. Think about how big of a cope that is to be saying that as a defensive argument in support of a terrorist organization. Okay. Then when it comes to this picture, okay, it is blanked out, so you don't necessarily see anything. But this is a CCTV video of a civilian that's been shot on the side of the road. And this is a Hamas fighter engaged in decapitation because they effectively want to torture and terrorize the population. So what's more terrifying than not only getting murdered, but also having your body desecrated and your enemies using your body as a war trophy? And that person is a victim. And then finally, we have like Shalik Souza or whatever her name is, like the German girl who got killed at a rave party. And she's in the back of a truck and her knee is bent backwards. And the Hamas militants are parading her corpse around Gaza like a trophy. Meanwhile, the audience in the background is beating her corpse with their fists and feet and bottles because they're so enraged by Israeli action. She's obviously a victim. And so when you follow the logic of Sam Seder, what you can say is that, well, this is nothing compared to what Israel does, and so it ultimately doesn't matter, right? In comparison, because Israel does horrific things in response to these things, you don't have to care about the individual murder of this man, the kidnapping of this woman, the decapitation of this corpse, or the murder of this woman and her corpse being paraded around like a hunting trophy. You don't have to care about that because realistically, Israel is worse. It's like a very dumb, illogical, sanitized, sheltered opinion that you can only hold if you've never been in a war zone. Okay? So, yeah. So Sam Seder is supposedly a very smart man who's a very good representative of lefty politics. And he just said one of the most geopolitically stupid, inane elementary school takes that I've ever heard in my entire life. You can care both about like the humanitarian crisis in Gaza being perpetrated by the IDF, and you can find everything that I showed you absolutely repulsive and beyond the pale and deserving of not only criminal sanction, but probably of death in war. Anybody who supports any of those actions, who lives in the Gaza Strip, anybody who materially supports Hamas, anybody who's a member of Hamas should answer for what Hamas did on October 7th. So everybody's late, blame Valor notifications. It's my fault for not having a regular streaming schedule. It's my fault. Gen X says, YouTube hates me. Hi, I'm late. Nope, it's my fault for streaming late. So, you know, my apologies. Razzle Smasher says, Shani Luke is the girl in the back of the truck. Random people in Gaza streets were cutting off her dreadlocks as souvenirs. Yeah. But we can't be upset because they've lived in an open air prison for 30 years. And depending on the day on Twitter, if you go on Twitter, they're like, this was Gaza before the war. And they're posting like families playing by the beach and staying in nice hotels. And there's like cool, like, you know, food shops and people walking around all happy and shit. And then, but then also those same people who are showing you how beautiful Gaza is, they'll also argue that it's effectively a concentration camp. And so it's like, guys, you got to pick a lane. You either got to say that it's a concentration camp and the Israelis are on the verge of exterminating you, which could be arguable now, or you got to say that Gaza was a physically beautiful place that needs to be restored to its previous glory. You can't be telling me one and then the other within 30 seconds. It doesn't compute. Christian Blair says, say what you want to say about pro-Israelis, but I never saw immoral stuff like that, at least in the U.S. I know some Israelis were on TikTok mocking Palestinians. Well, Christian Valeris, the strongest argument against what you're saying right now is that the IDF sodomized somebody in prison, and I think that person died, and then the Israeli population was protesting for those soldiers not to be convicted. But you don't have photo after photo, video after video of like IDF soldiers holding up, Gazan civilians like war trophies for fun. You do have them engaging in other misbehavior, like, I don't know, destroying 80% of buildings, like ransacking homes, being brutal with people that they're incarcerating. There's other abuses. But what's funny about having a consistent moral perspective is I can say that it's on the spectrum of violence, and it's abhorrent when the IDF engages in these like violations of the laws of war and human morality. But guess what? It's also a violation when Hamas does it, and Hamas is necessitating a military response in which 80% of what Israel is doing now would occur. So anyways, I think Sam Seder has been suckered in by a elementary school level argument. That's my main point. What kind of culture do Palestinians have on the ground where you see broken bodies of people and your instinct is to rally around these people and cheer them on the streets? One that effectively thinks that, Israelis are not real humans. They're settler, colonial, satanic, evil, colonizers who deserve everything. Like the whole, the whole lefty meme of, and it's a guy about to go to sleep, and it's like me sleeping perfectly restful, knowing that my enemies are ontologically evil and there's nothing wrong that I can do to them that would ever be, unjustified. That meme, matter of fact, I'll just pull it up. Ontologically evil meme. Let's pull this up. So this was repeated in the Vosh community about Trumpers for a long time. How I wake up knowing my enemies are ontologically evil and there's no act against them, which is wrong. This is genuinely believed by Hamas about Israelis. That Hamas and the people who support Hamas, they believe that this is literally true, and therefore they can do whatever they want to their opponents. So in the United States, this is a joke. In the organization of Hamas, this is their philosophy. And Hassan sweeps for that philosophy.
Thrown at me growing up and playing basketball. I mean, there was a lot of...
Exactly. Wowman542 said it before I did.
I've experienced anti-Semitism, but, I would put it in the context of like, you're a parent, I'm a parent. If my kid is going through something very difficult, it's obviously difficult for me, but it's more difficult for them. And it's a question of prioritizing.
So Ali, if you, we can have a chat, you and I, about it. I think there's certainly an argument to be made that the IDF does think that they're, the Palestinians or Hamas specifically are ontologically evil. But if they believed the same way that Hamas believed that sentence, then there would be, instead of 20,000 or 40,000 dead Palestinians, it would be 2 million dead Palestinians, because they would have already executed everyone. If they believe that, you wouldn't have one case of rape that you could point to in a prison that resulted in a death, and then the population argued for the release of the soldiers. You would have dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of cases that you could point to of the IDF sexually assaulting someone to death. So no, there is a spectrum of violence, and it's very clear based off of statistics alone that Hamas engage in the worst kinds of violence that you can engage with, as far as like rape and murder, and that Israel, you can point to anecdotes of them engaging in the same behavior, but you can't point to it being systemic. So no, there is a difference. There is a moral difference between these two actors. Sapient Green for DKK 100. Thank you for the donation, King. Any person who glorified or defended the act, seventh, either immediately after or a longer period of time, has, in my opinion, completely lost any moral standing. They have no principles. Yeah, the problem, though, Sapient, is that they're irrelevant. All right? So we're live to, like, 50 people on Valor Media Network. On my home channel, I'm live to, like, 70 to 110. Now, with streaming, I think that with streaming, you just have to do it for a long time. You just have to keep showing up and keep streaming, right, in order to build up an audience. But the point is that Hasan goes live. He has 20,000, 30,000 live. And when he says the crazy shit that he's saying, nobody bats an eye. They're like, yep, that makes sense. You had iDubbbz talking about American imperialism and American terrorism. iDubbbz has been brain rotted by Hasan Piker, and iDubbbz is like a normie lefty. Yeah. Ali says, yeah, I'd love to have a chat about it sometime. I'll gather my arguments. Okay, sounds good. Let's continue.
These things, you can have two thoughts in your head at the same time, but to center oneself or to perceive that one's victimization is sufficient to ignore the
Sociologic says, even though we're doing sweeping for the IDF, like the chat, Ali brings up an excellent point. However, I would say you will not, in this conversation or in our conversation in the future, you will never find me defending the IDF raping their prisoners. You'll never find me defending destroying 80% of the infrastructure and buildings in Gaza. You'll never find me defending, I'm trying to think of another thing, but just like, engaging in airstrikes known to kill dozens of civilians in order to kill one Hamas militant. You're not going to find me defending that ever. Whereas I think that the inverse cannot be said of Hasan Piker, as we'll see later today.
I got to stop you because I don't think anyone. I don't know who's doing that.
Well, I just said, like,
that's a brave take, Gen X. Brave take in this world.
You just presented as the Israeli population feels like they're isolated and this and that.
There's two different separate conversations. There's like the American Jewry who's like, I have nothing to do with that place. And then the Israelis, right? So like when you're talking about in terms
of the way that you characterize the Israeli feeling, was that they feel isolated, et cetera, and I can understand that, but to not have the first thought of like we are committing, like you say, genocidal acts, and if people want to call it genocide, I don't, obviously it's got to be. It's a legal term, but I think that it's colloquially speaking, at the very least, it is a genocide. And to not recognize that as the fundamental issue, the first issue, I think is blinkered. I don't know how else to say it. It's a little gobsmacking to me.
Well, so I do agree with you that obviously in Israel, people, I think the problem, and just to say on a higher level, I agree with you. Like, obviously, the people in Israel compared to like what's on October 7th, they were victims. After everything that's happened, obviously, whatever they've suffered pales in comparison to the mass destruction and like wanton death of civilians in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank, too. Lots of awful stuff.
So this is worth addressing while we're here anyway. So let's take a look at the UN definition of genocide, because this is how I think that you could be justified in using the term. So Article 2, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in a part a national, ethnic, religious, or racial group, such as killing members of the group. Okay, that's happening. I think the Israelis would argue that they're attacking Hamas militants, not all Palestinians, but they're certainly killing members of a group. They're causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. I think that you could 100% argue that being trapped in Gaza, unable to escape into Egypt, unable to escape into Jordan, unable to escape into Israel, and then effectively watching your neighbors get bombed and murdered would absolutely cause mental harm. And if you were caught as collateral damage, then 100% it could cause serious bodily harm. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. I think that there's an argument here that you could say that the slowdown or deprivation of water and food into Gaza could be viewed as a genocidal act under this subcategory. Imposing measures intend to prevent bursts within the group. I don't think they necessarily have that one. If anything, I think they might have the opposite. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So that, to my knowledge, hasn't happened on a broad scale. So we have three things. And so Sam is saying that these things could be viewed as genocidal. I agree with that. But the reason why I think a lot of us have issues with that term, I'm going to see if there's like a lay definition. So it looks like AI, the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. This is kind of more the colloquial definition. And I think when it comes to the colloquial definition, like if we have an ongoing campaign in Gaza and the original population is 2.2 million, current estimate of Gazan deaths, I think it was around 60,000 and maybe like 200,000 indirectly or something like that. So if we have 60,000 dead people, let's just use that as a raw number. Okay. Let's just use 60K. So if we're at 60K over the course of what, 2 years, 60K, I this might seem callous, but I'm trying to make a point here. Okay, 2,200,000. So 60,000 divided into 2,200,000 is, what is that? 2%, maybe 3% of the population. Okay, so if you're talking about annihilating a population, because we are talking about, like, in comparison, European Jewry, the Holocaust probably wiped out in some places like 80%, 90% of the Jewish population, and the remaining population fled. Other areas, it might be like 50%, 60% of the population, and the remaining population fled. So when you're talking about 3% over the course of 2 years, it's not whether or not it can become genocide akin to the Holocaust. It 100% could, and we need to prevent that. But this is what people are doing the subconscious mental comparison to.
That being said, I think the problem with Israel, just to try to...
Yeah. And actually, some people brought that up. And Casey from Long Island says, and half of those are Hamas militants. Big in Gaming says, how many of those 60,000 are fighters, or is it all civilians? Yeah, exactly. And that's granting that all 60,000 are civilians, which is probably not the case. I think that Hamas, the Al-Qassam brigades, right? How many Hamas fighters are there? There's 30,000 total fighters in Hamas. How many Hamas fighters have been killed? And they're saying it's U.S. Intel guessed that it's around 13,000. Okay. So a third of Hamas has been wiped out. Israel is estimating that 17,000 to 30,000 of them are fighters. So we all have the fog of war, right? So we can't trust anybody in this situation to provide 100% accurate information. But the point is that, like, I wasn't even calculating militants, because I think my point stands. Even if every single person killed in Gaza was a civilian, my point would still stand that wouldn't be a genocide akin to the Holocaust in the way that we would think about it historically. Okay. Conservative liberalism says, good showing on Tim Pool, by the way. Fun back and forth you had with Econoboy. Yeah, Econoboy's smart. I just think that he's a little bit too lefty for my taste. I think Tim and I, weirdly enough, are probably very similar politically, but he just caters to a totally different audience that I am more interested in challenging than I am interested in, like, sweeping for. Conservative liberalism says, can we stop caring? Nope. And sorry, we got like 4 more hours to go, and we got time tomorrow to do it. So yeah. Gen X says, conservative liberalism, not as long as the religious right has a say. I know it isn't just them, but I think they're the driving force. Maybe religious left too, I guess. So yeah. All right, moving on.
To explain what's happening there, because I do agree with you, is just like the media apparatus and the feeling that they have there. It's like there's not a lot of space emotionally, and like even the information that they're consuming, I think that would allow them to have that kind of like self-realization. And like you said, a lot of Israelis don't know what's happening
There are
necessarily.
some. I mean,
There are some, yeah, of course there's some.
Haaretz, what was it in the fall? You had the publisher of Haaretz, speaking out about what was going on there, and the paper was essentially, a cutout, or there was an attempt by the government to basically shut them down on to some extent. I mean, so
what's your
yes,
explanation why Israelis don't care? It's not that they're evil, right?
Well, I think, look, there's I'm sure that there is a mass, sort of like a failure to deal with trauma. I think some of it is, frankly, is a racism, and I think, how can you explain? How can I explain how I just watched a clip of people at a Trump rally chanting USA, USA, to watching a video of people being, taken into that prison in El Salvador and having their heads I mean, I don't know how I can explain that. So I don't know how I could explain how the Israelis are able to the extent that they can see what's going on in Gaza, have that reaction. But I know that it's wrong. And I think, some of it undoubtedly is a racism. Some of it is, maybe some type of mass failure to deal with trauma. I mean,
Sorry. Trying not to have a stroke. Okay, this is again where lefties lose me, okay? So apologies to chat. All right. Okay. Maybe it's racism. He doesn't understand why people can act like Nazis in the early 20th century. So this is one of the things that Jordan Peterson said, and I swear to God, you guys, 2016 to 2018, Jordan Peterson was based. I don't care what anybody says, all right? One of the arguments that he was making at the time was that the lesson of World War II is not that the Germans and the Nazis were these irredeemably evil people who had something just fundamentally incorrect about their character that made them commit the Holocaust. It's that there are Nazis inside all of us. There are genocidal, monstrous, murderous freaks inside all of us. And we have to look out for the monsters inside of us in order to prevent us from becoming the monsters that we look at in history. That's the argument about it. So effectively, like Sam Cedar saying like, well, I don't understand the psychology of people who are cheering on the deportations to El Salvador. It's like, okay, well, then you don't understand basic human like tribal psychology. Okay. And then the same thing with, well, I don't understand the Israeli conflict. I just think that it's wrong. It's like, dude, you could understand if you wanted to. Matter of fact, I hate to say this, but it's true. If he has a family, right? And I'm not talking smack. I'm not saying anything like crazy or vile. I'm just thinking about the logic, okay? So let's say that somebody breaks into your house and they threaten to kill your family, or they succeed in killing one of your family members. What is your attitude towards that person, immediately in the aftermath? Well, immediately in the aftermath, the first instinct is going to be to defend your family. The second instinct is going to be to get revenge for the killing of your family member. That's what it is. So extrapolate that sense of fear, anger, hatred, and grievance out to the tribal level, and you already understand war. It's actually not that hard of a concept. It might be hard to understand when you're rich, you're in a safe country, you talk shit about politics online every single day for 8 hours a day. You don't have to existentially fight in order to continue your existence, et cetera, et cetera. It might be difficult for you to understand it, but I would say that we talk about privilege a lot in the lefty spaces. I would say that not being able to understand the concept of violence is a privilege. I'll put it that way. So Big in Gaming says, I wonder how Sam would react if someone did some terrible stuff to his family. Literally, Big in Gaming, you and I were probably thinking the same thing at the same time. Wowman542 says, as someone else said, the line between good and evil runs down the middle of every man's heart. Yeah, I think that's a Game of Thrones quote, but he probably stole it from somebody else. Sacred Snow asks, states, major agree, JBP had great psychological content. In my opinion, he went downhill because he decided he was an expert on everything. We're all guilty of this. But what I would challenge any of my critics to do is, if you think one of my perspectives is incorrect, explain it to me how I'm incorrect. Because I don't just take, hey, Connor, you were an entry-level Marine and an entry-level cop, and you studied history and got a bachelor's degree. That's not enough to make you an expert on everything. You have to tell me how I'm wrong, because I do try to study a lot of things all of the time. He doesn't want to understand. Yeah, taking day, that would be my argument as well, is he doesn't want to believe that he's capable of viewing these things as righteous or justified in the correct circumstances. And so as a result, he's not making any kind of attempts to understand American cheers for aggressive and extra constitutional deportations, or Israeli cheers for vengeance for October 7th. So he's perfectly intelligent enough to understand it. I'll read this and then I'll get back into it. Big in Gaming says Sam Seder constantly gets shown how wrong he is to his face. Wonder why he never reflects on that. Well, you know, we all like to think that we're right. We all like to think that we're smart. But of course, the only people who are smart are the 50 people who showed up in my chat. All of you guys have 3,000 IQ and the most perfect taste in content. So
I don't know all those. I think, you know, part of it, I think there's some of the makeup of, you know, immigrants to Israel over the past several decades. I'm sure all of that enters into it, and I'm not in a position to sort of like be able to psychoanalyze it beyond the sort of, you know, vague notions.
Sure.
But
yeah, and I
from
agree.
my perspective, it's gobsmacking, and you know, to me, it has shown, and, you know, I never identified myself as a Zionist as a kid or, you know, through the years, and I never identified myself as an anti-Zionist. I don't think I, you know, I think those, it wasn't really until someone heard me articulate my perspective on this that they referred to me as anti-Zionist, and I have, you know, I don't really care one way or another how I'm labeled, but to me, it shows a failure of that system of government that Israel has, and it has failed both from a perspective of, you know, what I think some people had as a notion of Zionism in the 19th century. It has been a failure in terms of keeping Jews safe. Frankly. It seems to have been a massive failure. And so
again, this feels like incredible privilege. So I'm going to articulate something real quick. So he's saying because the October 7th attacks have happened, this means that the Israeli state in general, like its purpose of existing and creating a homeland for Jews has failed. But let's say is worldwide Jewish population 1950 so was 11 million. Then worldwide Jewish population 2024, so up 30% since a generation or two ago. Then current population of Israel is 10 million. And then population of Israel in 1948 is 800,000. So in the state of Israel, the population has 10x'd since 1948. And since the end of World War II, in which 6 million Jews were wiped out, so almost like a third of the total population of the world, or half the total population. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. Total Jewish population, 1939. There was 16 million. Total Jewish population, 1945. 11 million. So pretty much a third of the Jewish population was wiped out in World War II. And then they've had almost a recovery since before the Holocaust. And Israel itself has had a 10x population increase in the past 2 or 3 generations. But Sam Seder, one of the Jews in the diaspora, he's deemed it an entire failure. The Israeli state has failed to secure anything for the Jewish or Israeli people, despite the obvious statistics pointing in the opposite direction of what he's stating. But he's smarter than everybody else. He's smarter than history.
I can't operate as someone who lives in Israel, but I can operate as someone who is an American in terms of like what we support, which is why I think we should end all aid. And as a Jew who sees my religion being used as what I perceive as a fig leaf for what Israelis or, Zionists are doing. And so
I'm okay with this perspective. If he's saying that, like, I still think that the state of Israel doesn't need to exist in order to safeguard the Jewish future. And I think that its existence invites controversy and potential like conflict. He can say that. And he can also say that he doesn't like that the state of Israel uses the continuation of Jewish people and Israeli people as like a casus belli, like a case for war whenever they're attacked. And so therefore it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I have no problem with him saying that, but I don't think that he can say that Israel itself is a failure.
I mean, that's where I'm coming from with this, that I don't know if there is a psychological state that can justify this. In fact, I don't think there is. And
yeah, that's moronic. This is actually him proving my point. This is the narrative as far as I understand it. This is the Zionist narrative, okay? It's that historically, Jews existed at the crossroads of humanity. As a matter of fact, it's geopolitics time. I know Big in Gaming is big into geopolitics, so we're gonna do this for Big in Gaming, okay? Let me not dox myself again. Let me go ahead and pull up Israel maps. Okay. So this is the modern state of Israel, which is in Syria, Palestine. So this entire territory, this area right here, which is at the crossroads of humanity. If you were in Asia, you wanted to get to Europe, you would travel through the Middle East and North Africa and potentially bump into Israel. If you were in Africa, you wanted to go to Europe, same thing. If you were in Europe and you wanted to go to Africa or you wanted to go to Asia, same thing. So Israel was at the crossroads of humanity. Okay. That's why everybody bumped into it. And so what happened is the Babylonians, the people from Baghdad, they conquered Israel. Iran, what used to be Persia, conquered Israel. The Greeks conquered Israel. And the Romans conquered Israel. And so as a result, you have all these times that they've been politically dispossessed throughout history until eventually what happened was the Muslims coming out of Mecca and Medina, they also conquered Israel. And then the Europeans came in and conquered Israel again. So we're already up to like a dozen times that it's been conquered. And the city of Jerusalem, which is at the heart of Israel, was put to the sword. So all the Jews that lived in this area, they got wiped out. And so the Jews were like, screw this. I'm tired of getting murdered. So a bunch of them moved to Egypt and they formed enclaves in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, etc. A bunch of them moved to Europe and they settled in Spain and Germany and Austria and Hungary and Eastern Europe and Russia. And so as a result, what ended up happening was they faced ethno-religious persecution in these countries, but at least they weren't getting murdered all the time, right? So in the 19th century, from some people from the Jewish diaspora says, we need to return to Israel and create a state that will safeguard the future of the Jewish population. And that, relatively speaking, within a century, coincided with Germany slaughtering a third of the international population of Jews, giving them a further incentive to move to the state of Israel. So Sapien Green says Israel didn't exist after the Romans did it. I thought the Romans created the Jewish diaspora. Honestly, I can take a look at it real quick. I thought that it was the Crusader sacking of the temple. When did the Jewish diaspora start? But the Romans sacked the temple as well. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, 600 before the Common Era. Why did the Romans kick the Jews out of Israel? So I guess there's multiple diasporas, right? Diasporas, whatever you want to call them. Well, they're saying they're both wrong. They're saying that it started as far back as the Babylonians, but the same vibes, okay? The same vibes. are that the Jews got conquered in Israel so many times that some of them were like, fudge this, we're moving, right? The video, This Land Is Mine, shows pretty much well how often the region changed powers. Yeah, absolutely. I remember that music video. I'm not going to play it right now, but the point is that this has been happening for probably 3,200 years approximately, and the technology and the cultures and the civilizations have changed, but the narrative of the Israeli area trading hands politically, that hasn't changed. So, anyways, I don't know what my main point of that was, except for to give you like a general geopolitical history of Israel.
And so,
It's just an attempt to understand, not justify. Because I mean, it is what it is, right? Like it is the way that it is, and so that's for a reason. And it's just trying to.
Well, conservative liberalism says so. This troubled piece of land that's been in turmoil for thousands of years now needs to be America's personal ant farm. Neat. Well, it helps that it's also located near. It's number one, it's allied with the United States. Number two, we trade a lot of defense technology secrets, and then number three, it helps to have a back door into the Middle East and North Africa, where like 2/3 of the world's energy supply exists. So it's not, it's not great. It's not terrible. Bud123 says, isn't putting all the Jews in the same place Israel make them less safe and easier to target as opposed to being more spread apart? Yeah, Bud123, there's an argument to be made both ways. Whether or not, because the truth is that you could have an international anti-Semitic wave of like anger and hatred that wipes out the population in each one of their respective countries, and they wouldn't even have the capacity to militarily defend themselves. That's what happened in Europe, obviously. But then with Israel, kind of like you said, if all of the Middle Eastern and North African nations allied together to take out Israel, they've tried it in the past and they failed. But let's say that they had a nuclear armed Iran that was willing to use nukes in order to like destroy vast swaths of the Israeli military, then yeah, it's possible that Israel could be wiped off the face of the earth. But the bet, I think part of the reason why Israel is so friendly to the United States is because they're betting that if they're friendly to us, if they share intel, if they work with us on defense stuff, if they, as insofar as they can, they provide us intelligence in order to help us, divide and conquer might be the most, abrasive way to say it, but politically control the Middle East and North Africa so we always have stable energy supplies, then they would probably hope that we would come to their aid if there was a genocidal war against the land of Israel. Half the world's Jews live in the diaspora. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Eric Dom kind of points this out. Right now, they kind of have the best of both worlds, a strong country and many in the diaspora. Yeah, that's kind of the point, right? So if the population is 16 million worldwide, 10 million in Israel, well, one of them could get wiped out and the other one would still survive. So it's kind of like a plurality of tactics. So if the 6 million that were international got wiped out, you would still have Israel. If Israel got wiped out, you would still have the 6 million internationally. And I think that if you look at history, Israelis and diaspora Jews have a reason to believe that this is a thing that can and will happen to them.
To explain it, that's all. I agree with everything you're saying. But actually, one thing I want to pivot to and ask you about.
Do you think that we should cut all aid to Israel?
I think that'd be justifiable, yeah.
And
we're talking about like military aid and stuff. Yeah, for sure. Israel can make their own bombs and shit.
Every
if they need, like, they don't need American military. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I think they do need it to do what they're doing, without a doubt. And
well, what I mean is they're not entitled to it, to say more accurately. Yeah. So yeah, I think military aid should be cut for sure until.
As a Jew, and I mean, obviously you have a different connection to Israel than I do, as through your family and whatnot, and through having lived there. But as a Jew, I take such offense to what is being done ostensibly to protect me and my family and my ancestors and my progeny and all of it. I think it's I think the conflation of Zionism and Judaism is both not keeping Jews safe and is wrong at its core. And we can see what it's even doing in the context of this country, the way that it's enabled Trump and to attack universities and to attack law firms and whatever. And so I don't know. And if you agree with that, great. If not, I'm happy to discuss it with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. And part of the reason why like this chasm started between me and, Hassan is very influential. So when he decides that somebody is an enemy of the movement for criticizing him, which is what I perceive happened, then it kind of becomes reality. For example, one of my criticisms of his is him not supporting Kamala Harris. Now, would she have stopped the war and been like a perfect dove? I don't know, but I know she would have been better than Trump. I know that for sure. Trump's posting like this insane Riviera, Gaza, the Riviera with Trump hotels. I mean, that's and like he's sending the 20-pound bombs. He's telling Netanyahu, you have a blank check to do whatever you want. Now, like it just came out that Biden didn't, did nothing to. I mean, listen, I think.
This like lefty excuse making for Trump being the lesser of two evils is actually crazy. That like listen to this, because Sam is gonna, at the end of the day, after all of his commentary, I guess is the nicest way to say it, he's still gonna ultimately agree with with Ethan that the Biden-Harris administration would have been infinitely better than a Trump administration, but he first has to talk about how bad the Biden-Harris administration is first before he can make that concession. Otherwise, his audience will eat him like piranha. And there's plenty of lefties in his audience and in Hassan's audience who will not acknowledge that the Biden-Harris presidency would have been preferable to a Trump one, which is insane. Like Trump, like Ethan just said, wrote Israel blank check, gave them all the military equipment they wanted. They even signed up. Okay. They even signed up for us to go in militarily and economically to help out with the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. There is no universe like the Avengers thing where there's like 14,435,000 universes in which, Trump promises the Gaza Riviera. There is not even one in which Harris promises the Gaza Riviera to Israel. It doesn't exist. Within all of the realms of possibility, there is not a Harris administration that signs off on the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So the fact that lefties have to do this tiptoe dance is actually really frustrating from an outside perspective.
Well, I'm talking about Kamala.
I suspect that I suspect that she would not have had the same policies as Trump. But at the same time, I think that it was a massive failure, both on a real human level. Like it would have, I think, had she articulated anything even remotely close to what I would hope her difference would have been, I think it would have probably had implications in the election. But I think perhaps even more importantly, it would have maybe implicated the behavior of Israel. So, I mean, look, I chose to support Harris because I perceived her as the lesser of two evils. But
yeah, me too. And I think that that's an important distinction to make at a time like this. Yeah,
I can certainly.
So, sorry, I want to address this chat. So, Alan Vanderlyn says, "Ugh, what a loser, Sam Seder. Damn it all." Well, listen, that's why I'm praying to God for strength. Okay, then, which is why leftists are never gaining political power. Thank God. You better hope. The populist left might be right around the corner, man. Like the populist right got their playbook and they won twice off of it. The populist left might be what comes next if we're looking at like a Jedi Sith backwards and forwards kind of thing, right? Then isn't Trump after real estate property in Gaza? I don't know if he is for real. That literally could just be like a meme or him being stupid. I can't imagine like a Trump hotel or a Trump casino in Gaza. It's so gauche, like it's so brazen that I think it's like almost too brazen for reality. Now, that being said, I've been wrong before. So, if if a Trump hotel or a Trump casino goes up in Gaza, then, don't hold it against me, okay? It just means that reality is absurd. And then Thimecat, which is the one that I wanted to get to, or Time, says, love from Canada. Just had an election. I felt ripped off. The political warfare in Canada is boring. American politics is almost actually more entertaining than hockey. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why we consume politics through drama and clash of personalities, is because we do make it interesting. We have a 6'4", 230-pound, steroided out himbo with a small head cheering on terrorist organizations, fighting a former YouTuber, shit poster, podcaster who did comedic reaction videos, and somehow the shit poster destroyed the 6'4", 230-pound himbo political analyst. So yeah, American politics can be quite interesting and quite exciting. Absolutely. So Christian Valera says, mainstream Dems aren't co-signing terror support or anti-Semitism. I know, but they do enough rhetorical damage that the crazy leftists do enough damage to the Democrats that it alienates normies, which is crazy because 55% of the Republican Party should be alienating normies, and yet somehow the split still goes right. Alan Vanderlyn says, we need intelligent, progressive individuals who can bring folks together and who do not budge on human rights and equality, period. Well, Alan, shocking as it may be, I'm a never Trump Republican, so I actually agree with what's being called more conservative Democrats. We had a really interesting watch through of Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who is probably insufficiently progressive for a lot of online people, but in general seemed like a really intelligent, articulate person who was passionate about his ideas and does care about human rights. So Bud123 says, the populist left is never going to materialize and win. Every time a progressive runs, there's infighting and claims of racism. Well, right. Maybe they'll get their stuff together. Maybe they'll become class reductionist and then they'll start winning. Is interesting a new synonym for the R word? Yeah, it is. I think Trump just launched. Yeah, he likes to do distractions. So Casey says, true, and I effing hate them for that, but that's because the Republicans have such a larger and better propaganda machine. I mean, they're absolutely talented. You can't argue with the results. Yeah. Big in Gaming makes a point that I would like to make. That is incorrect. Pod Save America, CNN, and New York Times have all been glazing Hasan. I would love to watch all of those institutions. I would like to see Pod Save America, CNN, and New York Times do a debate reaction to Ethan Klein versus Hasan Piker, where Hasan Piker glazes the Houthis. Yeah.
I understand how some people were just so repulsed by what was happening that it made it almost impossible for them to vote for Harris. I think,
I understand why they didn't. I totally understand the perspective. Like, I'm so disillusioned with this administration, I can't support Kamala. But at the same time, like a hugely influential political streamer like Hasan, who has a huge influence on people, I think, and who's someone who who's very vocal about being pro-Palestine. I feel like it's an abdication of responsibility to be like, I'm not voting for Kamala, or I'm not telling you who I voted for. I suspect he voted for Jill Stein personally.
Agreed.
But either way, he hasn't said, and he wouldn't endorse her. Now, like, if you're just like a random protester or whatever, and like, you're like, I'm so disgusted, I don't want to vote, that's fine. But if you're like a high level political streamer, and basically you have the capacity to weigh like the lesser of two evils and what that means, I feel like it's an abdication of responsibility to not make that call.
I mean, I certainly have been critical of people who, generally don't vote for the lesser of two evils. But I think, and certainly, in the run up to the 2016 election, I certainly that was my.
Yeah, so this is sorry, real quick. Big in Gaming says it's amazing that being pro-Palestine has been conflated with being pro-Hamas. Yeah, that's honestly like pretty frustrating, because I think that if you actually dissociated those two, like if you said like, I want the Palestinian civilian population to do well, and I think what the IDF is doing is very criticizable, to put very mildly, and I think that there needs to be a better plan for Gaza and its civilians. That's like I think a sane analysis of reality. Whereas saying like, oh, the IDF is so bad we actually have to support like jihadist murderers. Nah, you've just lost. You've just lost any normie. You've lost any moderates. The fact that any leftists are even playing hide the ball on this stuff is crazy. Christian Valera says, Pete is the best, but unfortunately he is gay, which means no one on the right votes for him, and a percentage of old school Dems don't either. That is my frustration. No offense to homosexual members of my audience. I'm happy that you're finding happiness and that you're attracted to who you're attracted to and all that kind of stuff. Good for you. But I do think that if Pete was 4 inches taller and heterosexual, he would be a white Obama. Mr. Geek says, if we want a Democratic Party, we do need to yeet these I can't support Kamala people. It is such a wild claim to say while Trump is running. Yeah. And we're all suffering the consequences, right? I can't wait to see what the economics look like in 6 months. The economics in the next 6 months are going to be insane. Expect a roller coaster. Anyone noticing that the twitching this guy doing? Yeah. He has Raymond Smith. Ethan Klein has Tourette's. And so he kind of has like a bunch of like nervous tics and nerve pain and all that kind of stuff. So he kind of freaks out and wobbles. I actually really identify with that arm wobble. Sometimes I'll do that. So, poor guy. He's got a nervous system issue.
Perspective. But again, what the Biden administration was doing was so horrific that her inability to signal that there would be any change. I think sometimes you have to take this at face value. And I think there would be certainly, definitely other things. You would not be assaulting the government like Trump is. But, I think probably this is the first election in as long as I've been doing this, and I think it's been 5 elections now. I mean, I'm old. That I couldn't really condemn someone from taking that position.
Jonah Boy says, can Pete just pull a Milo Yiannopoulos and say he prayed away the gay? That's wild. I'll float that to my my Democratic friends in the DC Signal chat. I'll say, hey guys, Jonah Boy has an interesting idea. We're going to ask Mayor Pete to pray away the gay. He can still have his husband as his roommate, and he can still take care of his children, but he needs to say that he went to like an evangelical pray away the gay camp, and now he's attracted to women. And then boom, Mayor Pete's in there. Mayor Pete for president 2028. I'll float that up there. I'll see if DC goes for it.
Based upon what we were seeing. I mean,
it's not just.
Yeah, imagine if you got hold on, not JD Vance. Imagine if you got who's the old, come on, the guy from Indiana. Why am I losing it? Mike Pence. Imagine if you got Mike Pence. Pete like went to Mike Pence and is like, listen, man, I'm doing my best over here. I'm struggling. I want to convert. And then like Mike Pence endorsed Pete Buttigieg. Oh, jeez. Good times.
Just some random person. I do. And I'll tell you
There we go. Conservative liberalism. We're not being very progressive in chat right now, but these are strategies that could work. All right. So maybe Pete's husband needs to take one for the team and just start identifying with the opposite gender. That might be an option. I'll float that one as well.
Kamala Harris wanted a ceasefire. She stated that. Trump said, "Finish them." I mean, let's be honest. Like for someone
Biden
like Hassan,
said, "I want a ceasefire."
I'm not voting
too,
for Biden. I'm not talking about Biden.
No, I understand, but we found out that Biden, in fact, did nothing to bring that about. So,
well, you can talk about Biden. I'm talking about Kamala Harris. What she said.
I mean,
well, she's the vice president. I mean, at the end of the day, she doesn't really do that much, right?
No. But I'm talking about the candidate. Biden, as a president, said he wanted a ceasefire. She, as a candidate, said, "I want a ceasefire."
Well, do you not? But even if you're like, I don't know how much I trust them. One's like, "I want a ceasefire," and the other one is like, "Finish them."
Well, listen, I think it was certainly obvious to me that Trump was going to be worse. But I think like if you're trying to get the candidate to show some indication of this, I can understand that. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I would disagree with it. But
yeah, I get your point too. Like ultimately, I understand why people wouldn't want to support them because of what they've seen. and like that. It feels like it feels like
it also shows a tremendous amount of just like electoral malfeasance on her part. I mean,
hold on. I disagree with this stuff, but I'm also trying to let them yap because obviously we have a lot of stuff to get through. But there is an argument because we had this conversation, for better or for worse, with PV. So PV, Progressive Victory, it was a Democrat PAC that I worked for. I'm not a progressive. I was their token Republican, but I still did work for them in the previous election cycle. And this was a conversation that we had that was split within the group chat. Was effectively that like half the people were so repulsed by what was going on in Gaza that they basically said that the Harris administration needs to come out against Israel in the harshest terms possible. And then the other half of the chat was like, no, we all saw October 7th. We think it's messed up, and we think what Israel is doing is messed up right now. But if you go super hard against Israel and effectively call them like genocidal freaks, then you're going to lose a substantive part of, Jewish folks who are a small but powerful part of the political coalition. And so I watched people way smarter than, well, maybe not way smarter, but I did watch people who were way more powerful and influential than me argue about which way to go in reference to Israel-Palestine. And the truth is it was split down the middle. So I'm not surprised that the Biden administration kind of virtue signaled about how they thought what Israel was doing was wrong, but then they ultimately didn't do anything crazy harsh to Israel to also kind of like wink and nod to the pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist, Jewish or Jewish sympathetic members of the Democrat coalition. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Marco Talo kind of makes this argument, and I think that was a conversation that we had. Most people don't care about Palestinians, and it's mostly young people who are online. That was a conversation too, because obviously it's wildly passionate people who do care about Israel-Palestine, but they are online more than they vote. So do you want to give up real voters for passionate people online? That these are all things you have to ask yourself in like an electoral situation. Because again, if you lose, infinitely worse things happen as a result of the opposition being in power. Jonah Boy says, I've consulted the orb. Out of 99 trillion timelines, there's only one where we win, and it was with straight Pete Buttigieg. Oh, man. Sacred Snow says, Cotter, did you see a heckler stood up at an AOC rally and called her as a genocide supporter for the Biden and try to stop Israel report? The left. Yeah. The left aren't even taking power. Yeah. Like that person, if they care about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, obviously the audience in a Trump rally is never going to care, but go harass the Republicans. Why are you harassing one of the most like progressive members of Congress who probably agrees with you on 90% of stuff? Why don't you go harass some Republicans? What the hell? Yeah, no offense, lefties. I know some of you guys watch me as a guilty pleasure, but if you guys, cannibalism is so common in the far left. It's insane. Half of the things that are done in this country that are against progressive values, it's not even because the right is that strong. It's because the left cannibalizes itself constantly.
They made an active choice. And I think, you could have put that Palestinian lawmaker from Georgia on stage. They made an active choice to signal to whomever they were signaling that they weren't going to do anything. Now, I happen to believe that she would have been better on this than Trump, but they were making an active choice to do that. I mean, it was really electoral malfeasance on her part, in my opinion. But I don't know what the point of litigating this is per se, but
well, we're talking about kind of my criticisms of Hasan and how this.
I don't.
Well, let me show you this.
I don't care.
Yeah,
about,
I know.
Honestly, I'm like
Let me show you this. This is
I'm
more.
Not, I honestly. Like,
yeah, you don't care. I know.
I don't care. I don't.
And why should you? I don't blame you. We talked about anti-Semitism, and you think that I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? But you seem to have conveyed that, compared to the destruction and everything happening, the genocide, the loss of life in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, that obviously that's way more important. So let me show you an example of something. And again, I know you don't care about the drama. To me, this isn't drama. This is one of the biggest, most influential streamers spreading something that I think is really dangerous. And you can agree or disagree, but it's a short clip, but I'll show it to you. And you tell me what you think.
this will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of fucking Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a fucking rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the fucking local dog catcher as Felix was posting, if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
Sorry, I'm gonna let it play. I'm still chewing, but notice how he says, "I'm so serious about this," and then watch how it's characterized after they talk about it.
Oh, by the way, he didn't misspeak. He doubled down on it yesterday. He said, "No, I agree. That's what I think." Now, just to recap, he says, anyone that's had positive feelings at any point about the state of Israel is a neo-Nazi that's not fit to be a dog walker. Now, to me, that seems like extremely dangerous, dehumanizing language about what could arguably be 70% of the Jewish diaspora, and certainly probably people you know in your family.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
That's
So hold on. This is one of the things that actually pissed me off about this conversation. Okay. You can be hyperbolic. Like, so for instance, what was it? Hasan Piker said that America deserved 9/11. Now, do I think that he actually looks at people committing suicide and get burned to death and, get smacked into the pavement because they had to jump out of a burning building? Does he actually think that any human beings really deserve that? In my most charitable, when I'm extending the most amount of charity, I doubt that's what Hasan Piker means, right? But what he does mean is that the United States has been so interventionist in the previous century that our chickens are coming home to roost, and that 9/11 is our just desserts because of how many people have been killed through our military adventurism. That's what he is saying, and he says that with his whole chest, and he means it. And so when it comes to Sam saying, "Oh, I think we're all being hyperbolic," I don't really think that Hasan Piker is being hyperbolic at all. I think in his heart of hearts, if he could create his ideal world, this would be true. That any sympathy for the state of Israel, any support for the state of Israel, any positive feelings for the support of Israel would be enough to effectively unperson you and make it so you cannot participate in society. I think that if Hasan was made dictator for a day, then that's exactly what he would do. And so Sam saying like, "Oh, he's just engaging in hyperbole." It's like, it's only hyperbolic because he's not capable of doing it. That's the only reason why. Besides that, I'm pretty sure that Hasan believes that exact phrase. And not only does he say that he believes that phrase, he doubles down on it again, where he says, "I am so serious about this." So Hasan is saying it's not hyperbole.
putting it mildly.
I mean, he says Zionism, and I'll tell you what I think is really.
Sorry, I got to correct you. He says Zionism, and then he says, if you had positive feelings about the state of Israel at any point in your life.
I got to tell you, if you look at what's happening right now, and you have positive feelings about Israel,
He said at any point in your life, Sam. Just to be clear about what he said.
Would I have said at any point in his life, someone's life? But I just think this is such a petty, like the idea that we're going to police. Hold on, let me respond. You want me to respond on this?
No,
I don't. Like I say, I don't care about this. But if you're going to force me to respond to it, what Israel is doing right now is so far beyond the idea that someone says any time in your life or not or whatnot. He's talking about Zionism, and frankly, I think it's very difficult for me to understand how someone could have positive feelings at this time. Now, you want to say in the past and what? Okay,
yeah.
Like I say, I will grant you at any time in your life that is too broad a step. But wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
But see. You go in and you're making this about anti-Semitism by doing this hopscotch about a poll that people had positive feelings that Jewish people do, and then therefore he is anti-Semitic. And honestly, that type of conflation, I think, is so dangerous and so disingenuous. I mean, I don't want to get too passionate about this, but I will tell you something. I have had a guy who went to my bar mitzvah, my sister's bar mitzvah, my kid's bar mitzvah, sat at Passover with me 3 or 4 times, call my father and ask him if I'm anti-Semitic. Now, this is just one, that is just an example, an illustration of conflating when he's clearly talking about Zionism. Was it hyperbole to say any time in life, whatever? The fact of the matter is this conflation is dangerous for Jews. It is a fig leaf and a way of weaponizing anti-Semitism that has enabled Donald Trump to do the shit he's doing, that has enabled the slaughter of thousands upon thousands of children and women and men, for that matter. It is not keeping Israelis safe. And this type of conflation, Ethan, is what I find far more irresponsible, frankly, than the idea that he said positive any time. I mean, look, you do a show
Sam,
4 hours a
So hold up. So let's just summarize this real quick. And I'm not gonna rake Sam over the coals too hard, because I think he's genuinely believing what he's saying while he's saying it. Okay. So I'm not gonna rake him over the coals too hard, but I do think what he's saying is stupid. All right. So first, he kind of dodges and say it's hyperbole. It's not. He says that he stands on that business. Hasan says that he stands on that business. And then what he effectively says, what Sam Seder says, is noticing anti-Semitism is more dangerous than actual anti-Semitism. Okay. Oh, so I saw Vandal Cabbage said, "Can you speak up?" And I was like, "Dang, is my volume low?" And then I saw the previous comment was, "I can't hear you while you're on your moral high ground, Sam. Can you speak up?" Good God. And so, noticing anti-Semitism, because let's face it, standing in front of random Jewish students and accusing them of genocide while they're trying to go to school inside the United States is anti-Semitic behavior. Okay. You have no idea if those Jewish students are pro-Israel or not. There's a 70% chance that they are, but you don't know if you're screwing with and harassing the 30% of the Jewish population that's not Zionist in their definition of the word, right? Then Sam is he's gonna blow out the category in a moment, and he's gonna say that Zionism, most of the support for the state of Israel comes from Christians. Therefore, it's also a criticism of evangelical Christians who support Israel. And it's like, okay, but evangelical Christians are, well, I mean, just whites, Northern European whites, are 60% of the population. So we might feel some anxiety, some racial anxiety, some ethno-religious anxiety, but we don't feel anywhere near as much anxiety as Jews or even Muslims or Hindus. And so comparing that to being like, oh, well, he's criticizing all people who are Zionists. It's like, okay, criticizing me is water off a duck's ass. I don't really care whether or not you care that I'm a tepid Zionist, right? Whereas if you're a Jew who just watched October 7th happen, and then you're seeing your lefty friends cheer it on, and then you're seeing people harass Jewish students on a college campus, I think that can send off some historical alarm bells, right? I think that Sam earlier, he said that like, this is a failure to deal with generational trauma. Well, I'm pretty sure that if you saw these things going on and you were told your entire life that grandpa's generation, 1/3 of the international Jewish population was slaughtered, then that would send off some alarm bells. Far be it from me. Now, what he's saying, though, which I think he's passionate about, so I don't want to give him too much flack for, is that Zionism is a counterproductive political ideology that makes the world a more dangerous place for Jews. That's probably how he legitimately feels. And he feels like it's a fig leaf to weaponize anti-Semitism to justify the Gazan genocide. I think that we can do two things at once, kind of similar to what Ethan's probably going to say, which is that you can care about the violence in Gaza and care about harassment of normie Jews at the same time. So I don't think that you need to do this where you say, oh, how dare you be offended that people are causing for your extermination and murder. How dare you be upset that people are being callous about the murder of civilians when there's a genocide ongoing? I think that's a crazy pants argument. I think you can only make it when you live in a safe country and you're rich as hell and you have no idea what violence looks like.
A day, he does a show 5 or as far as I could tell, 15 hours a day, and to focus in on that one tiny clause.
This is not one
sentence.
Tiny clip, Sam.
Well,
you don't know.
This
is a totality of behavior.
But you.
And by the way, it's easy, and I appreciate that you can hand wave it away and say that it doesn't.
No, I'm not hand waving it away.
Well, you kind of are.
I'm saying this.
You're saying it doesn't. You're saying actually, I'm wrong for caring about it.
No, yes. In fact, I'm saying this conflation is incredibly dangerous. It is disingenuous.
I think it's dangerous to ignore what's being described as dehumanizing, violent language for American Jews that have nothing to do with the war.
That is a complete mischaracterization of that.
It's not.
He's
not fit to be a dog walker.
He never says the word Jews.
He says a neo.
Listen. How many members of Kufi have positive feelings towards Israel? How many millions of members of Kufi, the Christian organization, have positive feelings for Jews? It is clearly not a function of their Judaism. It is not a function of their Judaism, and so it is not.
But it describes most Jews.
No.
Yes, it does, Sam.
It describes most Christian evangelicals too.
It may do them too, but it also describes 73% of Jews.
That is not anti-Semitism. That is about
I don't know.
What
do you call it when somebody's discriminating against the vast majority of a racial or religious group, Sam?
I'm sorry.
Ethan won.
You want to look at evangelical Jews?
I don't care about evangelical people.
Okay, but I'm talking about the way you're constructing this.
I think
you can say the same thing about Christian evangelicals too. It is not anti-Semitism. It is not. It just isn't.
Like, taking one example in isolation, which is what we've done here.
Well, you're the one who gave it to me.
Yeah, well,
I don't even want to talk about it.
I disagree with you.
I'm using your example, and in that instance, that is not anti-Semitism.
Well, I disagree.
Conflation. Okay, well, that's our disagreement.
Yeah.
But I think that conflation is incredibly dangerous.
Well, I disagree as well.
Jews, I think it's dangerous for this society.
I think, Frank.
I would love to hear Sam continue to describe why he thought that it was dangerous. Okay. So saying that what Hasan Piker said, to reiterate it, just in case we got lost because everybody started yelling. Hasan Piker said that you should not be able to be a dog catcher in American society if you vaguely support the country of Israel. So, and he's so serious about it, et cetera, et cetera. So he thinks that Ethan Klein, because he vaguely supports the right of Israel to exist, he should be dispossessed from American society. And Ethan Klein's like, hey, that's hella anti-Semitic. 70% of Jews support, Israel. And then Sam goes, okay, yeah, so do some Christians. As a matter of fact, there's more Christians. It's like, okay. Doesn't change the fact that it's like a pretty messed up, bigoted, effed up authoritarian thing to say. But Sam has to play defense because it's on his team. So I would just be like, yeah, it's messed up. That'd be easy. Hearshot says, I'm sick of hearing about the isms. Well, they're not sick of hearing about you, Hearshot. Christian Blair says, God, I wish Destiny wasn't a sex pest and destroyed his credibility. He would have been so good in these combos. Destiny can come back. Give it a year or two. If you vaguely support the country of Israel, you're a Nazi. Not sure how that follows. Well, because they're allegedly, according to their perspective, committing a genocide in Gaza right now. So if you support the right of the state of Israel to exist, then by logic, you're, supporting their defensive, quote unquote, defensive actions, which I'm sure Sam and other people would argue are not truly defensive. They're pretexts through which to do ethno-religious replacement. I don't like dogs. Brooklyn, that's very sad to hear. Do you like cats? Do you like any kind of animals? Do you like lizards or snakes or frogs? I think anybody who likes snakes, no offense to the 3 snake people in chat, I think that if you feed live animals to a reptile, there's something wrong with you, like psychologically. However, I will accept you as a member of this community. I think it's more important to, I guess my category would be, do you like animals at all? And if you like animals, then you're probably cooler in my book just because you like other living things. Then if you feed other living things to other living things, I think you're kind of a freak, but at least you like animals. Vandal says, "Oh, come on, they're frozen." We found the snake person. I just threw out a depth charge, and Vandal was like, "Come on," and I'm standing right here. That was awesome. I didn't know I was going to catch Vandal with my depth charges. I just kind of started dropping them. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, conserve liberalism says H3 conceded that Israel's committing a genocide and even went as far as to call them IDF terrorist organization. So I don't know what they're doing. Yeah. That H3 is, let's just put it this way. He's far to the left of me when it comes to the criticisms of Israel. I think you could admit what the IDF is doing is messed up in some regards without giving away the entire game and being like, yeah, they're morally equivalent to people who murder civilians. Like, no, they're not. Collateral damage is not the same as intentional murder. It's messed up. It still deserves criticism, 100%, but it's not the same. Hearshot says, I own a snake because I hate animals. Yo. Friendly fire. Ceasefire. Make the range cold. We swept up Vandal Cabbage because, he feeds frozen animals to other animals. And then Hearshot is like, no, I am everything that you should fear. I own a snake because I hate animals. Don't bring up the Nintendo thing. We'll lose like 10 people in chat, okay? Oh, geez. All right. Hold on. Let's listen. Let's not alienate 30% of chat with another Nintendo rant. Let's continue with the content before I get in trouble.
I think it's dangerous to what I perceive as hand waving. What is happening here? I know you said you aren't doing
I'm
that.
not hand waving.
You're doing the opposite. You're endorsing
decades of thought about this.
So right, sure. But the point is, you're saying that this is not dangerous. How dare you?
Hold on. So Christian Valeris asks, and he's a regular, so I have to do it. So no, I like Nintendo just fine. Okay, I have a Nintendo Switch in my house that plugs into a controller, and I play it with my son. We play Mario Kart. We play Super Smash Brothers. What the argument that I made that pissed off like 30% of chat is I said that if Nintendo is your primary console and that's like all you play, then I think that you're potentially socially stunted, and then that manifests in weird sexual kinks. But I ranted about it for like 10 minutes, and some Nintendo people got really upset.
You care about this? I think it's dangerous
I'm not saying that at all.
I personally,
I'm
Jewish people have a collective memory of trauma, Sam, and it starts a certain way. And it starts with dehumanizing language, like saying you're not fit to walk a dog. I mean, what are we doing here? It's irresponsible language.
He's not talking about
Jews. He's talking about 73% of Jewish people.
No, you said that.
No, that's a poll that's readily available.
No, you made that connection. He did not. Because we have millions upon millions of members of Kufi. We have millions upon millions in this country of evangelicals who also believe the same thing.
Does your dad have?
You cannot say it's anti-Semitism.
Could you describe?
You cannot say it's anti-Semitism if you're also including millions.
If you're a woman or feminine, it's okay to like Nintendo because it's built for you. All right. And I still love Smash Brothers. I play Smash Brothers with my son. I'm just saying I also play adult themed games, but let's try not to piss off 30% of chat, okay?
Millions upon millions, far more Christians than Jews.
Would you say that your father, who you mentioned, said something to you, that he's ever in his life had positive feelings about the state?
So hold on. Sorry, we shouldn't fall down the Nintendo hole, but Sapien Green says you have and are actively cultivating viewers who are willing and able to sit and listen to you for hours at a time. How are we not the socially stunted people that you're talking about? Because Sapien Green, number one, by being in my chat, you already have a 3,000 IQ. You're already smarter than everybody else, and you have excellent taste in content. So you're already a step above just right there. Number two, a healthy chunk of people in my chat are professionals. They're listening to me while they're working their other jobs, they're coding, they're doing tech stuff, they're doing design stuff, whatever. So we actually have, we might not have as big of an audience, but a substantive part of our audience are professionals. And then what I would say is, even if you're not a professional, you're just like, you might not be a Chad or a Stacy right now, but through virtue of consuming this content, you will become a Chad or a Stacy in the long term. Yep, exactly, Hearshot. Exactly. You will be a Chad or a Stacy just through consuming this content. See, I code physics. Exactly. If Pokemon existed, we would 100%. Okay. Let's come on, guys. Get away from Nintendo. You're proving my point.
State of Israel.
I've had positive feelings of Israel.
Well. Does your dad have any positive feelings about it now?
I would assume so.
Not in terms of like I support them, but
I've
I think
positive
Israel...
feelings. I went to Israel on.
Okay, good. Then you're a neo-Nazi, not fit to walk a dog. How do you feel about that?
No, that's you saying that.
That's
that
literally what he said. I'll play it again.
No.
I think like this will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of fucking Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a fucking rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the fucking local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this.
Another thing he's doing, by the way, and Hasan is
listen.
He plays around with the term Zionist, right?
You can say that's a wrong thing to say, but he's not talking about Jews. He's talking about people who have exhibited these positive feelings, and that includes millions upon millions of Christians. More Christians.
Okay, well, listen, I don't think they're neo-Nazis, not fit to walk dogs, either. I think it's insane language.
Listen, you don't want to tell me that you have never engaged in hyperbole. You and I both are in this business, and we do that.
Yeah, you're right. I just think that,
it's listen. You can say it's an inappropriate thing to say. It's an unfair thing to say.
I just think like Arabs that support Israel aren't fit to walk a dog.
It is not anti-Semitism.
Okay, well, we're at an impasse on this one.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, but anyway,
this is where I think Ethan did a better job than he would have ever given himself credit for. Is he has in the past said he's not a debater. He's not somebody who enjoys debates. He doesn't like doing it. It's not his style of content, etc. I'm just a dumb guy, blah, 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 blah. But the thing about it is he actually, when he's very passionate about perspective that he thinks he's 100% correct on, he can argue it. And then also another thing that I think, shows that he's actually smarter than he thinks he is that when they're at an impasse where they've looped on it, once or twice, he's saying like, okay, we will not be able to bridge this gap because this is the way that I feel and that's the way that you feel. And we are in a contradictory position. And he's okay with standing on business. Some people who are agreeable, they'll try to move to the other person's side, even if they viciously disagree. Whereas Ethan isn't doing that. He's actually a better debater than he gives himself credit for. Sacred Snow says Ethan spamming the clip being debated is a goated strat. It hits so much harder. Yeah. Oh my God, so true.
Wait, another thing he does is he says Zionist tendencies, and he's someone that plays around with Zionism. He calls me a Zionist, and again, I know we're arguing here about semantics of what Hasan said, but I don't think that you could accurately characterize me as that, as it's used colloquially. You don't know, right? But he's saying Zionist tendencies. What does that mean? What's a Zionist tendency?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're going to talk to him on Friday. You can ask him what a Zionist tendency is. I suppose I would guess. And, like I've looked at polls too, where, people have various different understandings of what Zionism is. But I think it is my guess, and I don't know what he was thinking specifically, but the notion of an ethno-state that engages and it allows whatever in the name of Zionism allows for this mass slaughter, I think is horrific.
Sure, me too.
Okay. I mean, then I think we the three of us agree on that regard.
Yeah, I think we're so. Another thing is like to take it even further. I mean, Hasan pretty much like openly supports Hamas.
Let's not talk about Hasan. Let's talk about this.
Sure. I mean, what do you want to ask me?
Well, I mean, if you want to ask me about, I mean,
Well, let me. I have
I'm not here to explore.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
have a list of things.
Feelings
That,
but if you want to talk about Hamas, I mean,
Yeah.
I think, look.
well, how do you feel about Hamas?
I mean, I feel that Hamas, people can perceive it as a liberation organization. We call them terrorists in this country. We call the
What
ANC
do you think about
terrorists.
them, Sam?
Listen, I think there are parts, I would imagine, of Hamas that have done good for the people in Gaza, and I think they have done bad things. But I sort of feel, I guess, ultimately probably like Ehud Barak when he said that were I Palestinian and I was living in Gaza, that it would be likely that I would join Hamas. I mean, that's what Ehud Barak said on multiple occasions. And I think that is very, that is an understanding of human nature.
That you're not affording Israelis, by the way, just to point out a.
Yo, did y'all catch that? He kind of just contradicted himself from earlier. He's like, oh, I just can't understand the people who are cheering on the deportations, and I just can't understand the people who are cheering on the Zionist conflict in Gaza. And yet he immediately quotes somebody who says, oh yeah, like if I was a kid and I was born in Gaza, then I would probably be a part of Hamas. We can understand the material circumstances that lead to people joining extremist organizations. That's not the problem. That's never been the problem. I'm sure that if I was poor and I grew up in like Ireland, immediately outside of Northern Ireland, and there were IRA members who were propagandizing me that we would never know peace or safety until the Brits and their sympathizers were expelled, I'm sure, I'm 100% sure that I would be sympathetic to the IRA, even after they did evil shit, right? But here's the thing. This is what we're talking about. Like, sorry, content warning, whatever. This is what we're talking about. This is a murdered man that Hamas is proud of. This is a woman who has blood on her pants, either through assault or because she was sitting in the back of a truck with other murdered people. This is somebody getting decapitated. You can't see it, but this is somebody getting decapitated because they were a civilian victim of Hamas. And then this is a party girl who's being paraded around in Gaza like a trophy, right? So Sam can say that, like, I can logically understand joining a militant organization because I'm oppressed, and so if I was born in their scenario, I can sympathize with that part of it. Okay, what about the murder? What about the kidnapping? What about the alleged rapes? What about the confirmed rapes? What about the slaughters? What about the beheadings? What about all of that, Sam? Because it seems like you have endless charity to understand how people become Hamas militants, but you have zero understanding of how people become Zionist or become like nationalists inside the United States. That's actually, like, I would say a wild catch on my part, is I didn't know that hypocrisy the first time I watched this through.
Inconsistency there.
How so?
Well, you're like, I refuse to understand human nature and their reaction. It's just evil, and I don't know how to explain it.
I didn't use the word evil.
Right. I'm inferring.
So hold up. Evil is an important word.
Ellie's, by the way, just to point out a inconsistency there.
How so?
Well, you're like, I refuse to understand human nature and their reaction. It's just evil, and I don't know how to explain it.
I didn't use the word evil.
Right. I'm inferring because I asked you if you think they're evil, and you didn't really answer that.
Listen, I don't know what Gazans felt on October 8th.
Yo, this is kind of we know what they felt on October 7th, which was that a substantive amount of them went out into the street and cheered on what they viewed as their heroes, who were bringing in kidnapped human beings that they were going to use as hostages in order to leverage against Israel. And they were bringing in the corpses of civilians that they had slaughtered. So listen, I'm not saying that's all Gazans. I'm not saying that's all Palestinians, but I would say that you can't act like these people are a mystery to you. They videotaped it. And they posted it to social media, and then they tweeted about it. And then same thing. even people who aren't even specifically related to the conflict, like Frogan or Hasan Piker or Noah Samson or Bad Empanada, all those guys, they also constantly, if they're not endorsing like the slaughter and kidnapping of civilians, they're making excuses for it. So Sam acting like it's like this opaque thing that he can't possibly understand, I think is myopic, is the most charitable way that I can put it. Props to, Gen X says, props to Ethan for correctly using inferring. Hasan often uses it when he means implying, and that is something that biggest pet peeves. Automatic W for Ethan. Well, let's check the difference, because I actually would use implying or infer, or I use inferring. Let me use it before I Google it. Inferring means that you are making statements that don't necessarily state something explicitly, and therefore I am believing, I believe an argument that I believe you are implying. So I guess infer and imply would be the opposite. That's the way that I would do it. So infer definition, deduce or conclude from evidence. Okay, so I was kind of right on that. And then imply means strongly suggest the truth or existence of something not expressly stated. Yeah, I would say that if somebody is implying something, then the opposite person infers it. Yes. Okay, good. We agree. All those pro-pallies are anti-Semitic, whether unwittingly or with intent. Yeah, but I don't like systemic arguments, Vedsunil, because I think we can really only argue with people at the conscious level. So we can argue about like subconscious motivations. We're all motivated by the subconscious effects, you know, upbringing, nature, nurture. We have so many things going on in the human brain that it's hard to argue with people like subconsciously. Whereas I think that if you say, you logically are implying X as a result of your statements, that's easier to contend with an argument. So, for instance, if I think that Hasan Piker is an anti-Semite, the reason why I think he's an anti-Semite is because he makes broad statements about who is deserving of violence and exile and excommunication from broader society. And broad swaths of who he's describing happen to be Jewish. Like 70% of the Jewish population to 80% would be irredeemable in Hasan's eyes. And so I would view that as anti-Semitic. Now, if he came to me and he said, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. So, like, I don't care if a person is Jewish. I just hate the specific ideology that they're a part of. That's totally fine. But then is he going to have that level of nuance when we're talking about Islam? Is he going to have that level of nuance when we're talking about Islamism or jihadism? Is he going to have that level of nuance when we're talking about like black people and crime rates in the inner city and all this bullshit? I doubt it. I almost guarantee you the second that you start talking about like inner city crime, he's going to call you racist. And I guarantee you the second that you start talking about jihadist terrorism, he's going to call you Islamophobic. He's not going to have that level of nuance or charity. So that's where what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So he can say he's just anti-Zionist, but I'll say, okay, bring that level of charity next time that I'm criticizing Islam. Bring that level of charity next time I'm criticizing, you know, inner city gang culture that affects predominantly black people, right? For me, my verbal pet peeves are literally and couldn't care less. Silver Jacket Man, you are going to be in trouble for these conversations and debates because I'm pretty sure those are used substantively through these conversations. My pet peeve of myself is that I use literally when I mean actually. And so you'll actually hear me correct myself where I use literally in a context that it doesn't work. And then I'll be like, hold on. I mean, I actually believe blah, 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 blah. Because we live in a post-ironic world, so sometimes you have to specify what you believe and what's hyperbole. Christian Valera says, the only Muslim thing about Hasan is he uses Arab pronunciation, lol. Yeah. I love whenever he's like, Al-Aqsa. Like he does like all that, Muhammad, Mehmet. When he's like, Dalila. I'm more of a fan of Nick Diorio's pronunciation of Muslim words. When, you know, once per stream, he just goes, Astaghfirullah. And I'm pretty sure the word is Astaghfirullah, which actually, let me look it up real quick. It's a really funny thing. But there's Family Guy skits that actually go through Islamic beliefs, and they're like AI videos on YouTube, but they all start or have like astaghfirullah as a part of it. So astaghfirullah is an Arabic phrase that translates to "I seek the forgiveness from Allah." so randomly throughout a Nicholas Diorio stream, he'll be like, "Astaghfirullah, Stewie." It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. I love the commentary guys. They don't have to like me. I love them. Yeah. All right.
But toward Hamas. But I can tell you that, we have there is a long history of terrorist organizations or so-called terrorist organizations like the ANC or the IR.
So hold on. I know Ethan's going to get pissed about it, and I do want to let the content flow, but it needs to be remarked. The ANC killed under 200 people in like a decade and a half. In 15 years, they killed 200 people, and I think a third of them were law enforcement, right? So the ANC is the African National Congress or Communist or something like that. What was the ANC? Maybe the ANC became the ANC. ANC terrorist organization. The ANC African National Congress. Okay. Now, this was armed resistance against the regime, but so they did kill 2/3 of their targets were civilians, but they were responding to authoritarian and draconian rule in South Africa. And then they also killed like 200 people over the course of 15 years. Hamas killed 5 times that number in a day, right? So them comparing to the ANC is gross. And then the IRA, they did something, attacks that turned the world against them. There was one set of attacks. The Mountbatten. Several IR attacks, particularly those targeting civilians and British officials, turned international opinion against them, including Omagh and Lord Louis Mountbatten. In this one, I think that the Omagh bombing was the one that I thought about. And in this one, when they assassinated a royal member, they killed 2 of his kids along with him. They put a bomb on a boat that he liked to go fishing on. Excuse me. And then they murdered 2 like 12-year-olds that were hanging out with Lord Louis Mountbatten. And you can make all the systemic arguments for why you think the monarchy is evil. You can make all the systemic arguments for why realistically they were going to become evil royals anyways. You can make all the systemic arguments for how the Irish suffered XYZ ABC. If you knowingly like slaughter children and that is your intent, then you lose any sympathy that I have with you. If you look at a child and you go, yep, that's my target, boom. Yeah, you're done. This attack, which killed 29 people, including civilians, was the deadliest single bombing in the history of the Northern Ireland conflict. It was seen as a particularly brutal act of terrorism and brought the IRA's violence into sharp focus. I think with the Omagh one, it might be the Omagh or it might be another one, but there was one where they bombed a war memorial. So it was a bunch of like veterans and like geezers. It was like 60 to 80-year-old men marching in a parade, and the IRA killed a bunch of 60-year-olds, right? And so effectively the IRA lost all moral authority, and then the world turned against them. So the point is that you can compare, if you want to compare them to the ANC, you can if you want to. I think that does damage to the reputation of the ANC compared to what they actually did and the way they conducted themselves. If you want to compare them to the IRA, that's fine. But within that comparison, I'm going to tell you, the more violent, the more repulsive that the IRA got in indiscriminately targeting civilians, the less the international community supported them. And then as a result, they ended up losing the fight for Northern Ireland. So we all like to meme about getting into firefights with British troops every now and then, but the truth is a lot more repulsive. Christian Blair says, the funniest skit in Family Guy is the Asian woman driving scene. How much signal do I need to cross 8 lanes? Oh. All right. That's just enjoying. That's anti-Asian hatred. Stop anti-Asian hate in my chat. No, Hearshot. I haven't seen that, but we'll probably check it out at some point. Nick Fuentes versus Sneeko. Harmonic Fox says, Valor Media, I'll become a commentary YouTuber just so you have someone in your corner as long as you can deal with me disagreeing with your natalism takes. No, I need somebody who agrees with me completely. All right. Let's continue. But needless to say, I think Sam Seder is being very silly, and I think that Ethan Klein is about to take him to task.
Even the PLO,
Now, Sam,
that ultimately become a political organization.
I think the comparison to Hamas to what happened in South Africa is insanely disingenuous. And I personally hate when people do that.
I mean, Mandela didn't think so.
Well, Mandela did think so. He explicitly stated that he avoided committing violence on the citizens because it would make reunification impossible. That's something he said.
I think you could say that tactically speaking, listen,
by the way, Sam, in the totality of their campaign, I think under 200 civilians died.
Yep.
And the people who did kill civilians were almost all held accountable for what they did. That's a difference, Sam.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that
a significant difference.
Well, it is a significant difference. I mean, I imagine many of those people who committed atrocities on October 7th are dead now. And you know,
this doesn't hold up. This doesn't count. Okay. So when it comes to this is one of the things that pisses me off the most, and it happens again in the Hasan debate. So I'll try to be brief about it. But this is one of the things that pisses me off the most. They say, oh, we'll hold them account in a court of law. Okay. Sam, and maybe to a lesser degree, but then Hasan definitely, they argue that it should be up to the Israeli government to infiltrate the area of Gaza, find the people who committed rapes and murders, and then individually arrest them for trial back in Israel. That's not incumbent on Israel to do. And number two, Mr. Bombastic says, lol, what did he just say? He said that a majority of the people who participated in the October 7th terrorist attacks are dead now, and that's how they're being held accountable. Right? No. The Israeli military is not fighting Hamas militants because they're trying to hold them accountable for October 7th. They're fighting, well, I mean, I guess that you could argue that's partially true, but they're fighting them because they're armed militants in an area that they're invading. It's about rules of engagement, not justice. Right? There's no sane person on the planet who thinks that you could conduct a criminal trial against the terrorists of October 7th. Absolutely insane. Christian Blair says, Sam is arguing in bad faith. I don't think he is. I think he, everybody uses the term bad faith, but bad faith means like arguing something that you don't believe. I think that this is like Sam's earnestly held dog shit opinion, right? That whenever people say like, oh yeah, they're just making this up because they like want to win the argument temporarily. Nope, I don't think so. I think this is his genuinely heartfelt, shitty opinion. Gen X says, oh, thanks. Just curious. Obviously, I know people can have religious experiences or join a new religion. Oh, you're talking to somebody about their religious experiences. Very based. And don't fool yourself. If Israel did that to Sam, Sam Hasan would still have a problem with it. 100%. 100%. If they exclusively killed Hamas militants, they'd be like, the only reason why October 7th happened was because of what you did beforehand. So they would still make excuses for Hamas militants while they were getting killed. So. Yeah. Mr. Mabastic, you're right. The ANC, now, whether or not the ANC actually like held trials or hung members of their own organization who did terrorist attacks that killed civilians, probably not, right? But what they did do is they politically disempowered people who wanted to wantonly slaughter the opposition. They wanted targeted attacks on police stations who were engaged in authoritarian and draconian behavior. They didn't want carte blanche to start slaughtering all whites in South Africa, which is part of the reason why I think Mandela is favorably remembered today. If he was like a murdering psychopath, he would be remembered more like Mugabe. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Mugabe like the person who took over Zimbabwe after Rhodesia fell? Who's Mugabe? Yeah, Robert Mugabe is revolutionary and former president of Zimbabwe. Yeah, Mugabe is remembered as somebody who took over a white majority area in Africa, but he's also remembered kind of as like a bloodthirsty, authoritarian, draconian tyrant. Whereas Mandela, people write infinitely more glowing articles about Mandela.
So
What does that have to do with
you could-
anything?
Well, that's accountability.
Being killed? Okay.
But
Conservative liberalism says, I know I came in late and missed the news segment. We didn't do the news segment. We rolled right into this. That he's going to throw a big military parade for his 79th? Yeah, I think that's super cringe.
I mean, being held accountable by the party that they're presumably doing the violence on behalf. Like,
But you're saying the entire ANC was held accountable?
No, I was saying Nelson Mandela's party, if someone killed a civilian, they would hold them accountable. They would charge them. They would disavow their actions.
The ANC did.
Yes.
Well, the IRA was bombing places in England and throughout Ireland. I mean, we have even the Irgun or the Stern gang when they killed, over.
I know I'm pausing a lot, but what he's failing to mention is the more bloodthirsty the IRA was, the less support they had. That is something that Ethan, I know that it's hard to argue in real time. We're kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, but I think that's something that needs to be pointed out, is that when the IRA viciously and indiscriminately attack or intentionally attacked civilians or killed children that they knowingly knew were going to be a part of the casualties, when that happened, they lost all support.
For 100 villagers in 1948. I mean, the history is full of example of organizations that commit terrorist acts. Now, I will tell you,
people look at South Africa.
I do not condone the killing of civilians, which is why obviously I'm upset about what Israel is doing.
Sure. The part that I don't like about
this would only work against the Zionists, where I swear to God, people keep bringing this up with Ethan Klein, whereas they're like, yeah, well, the reason why I don't support Israel is because they keep killing civilians. And then Ethan is like, yeah, neither do I. And then he just keeps it moving, which is awesome. Ethan W. Ethan's kicking so much ass, despite supposedly being a terrible debater in his own words.
About people say, I feel like people sweep for Hamas by saying, like, what do you expect, right? But the truth is that people use South Africa as an example, but what South Africa shows is that you don't need to commit a violent war against civilians to liberate yourself.
Well, I mean, listen, we had for a year, we had the Great March of Return, where, Sinwar himself was involved in that. There was Palestinians marching on a regular basis over the course of the year. I don't know how many it was, 50 or whatever, that were innocent people who went there, and snipers are shooting down unarmed civilians. And so, So
the only thing that I want to bring up is, and by the way, if Israel was evil in this regard, that's totally fine. If you want to say the March of Return, Palestinians are protesting for the right to return to their homes that are actually in Israel at this point because of all the border increases over time. And they were peaceful for the most part, but then some violence erupted somewhere or whatever, and Israel used that as a pretext in order to do horrible things. If that's your narrative, I don't really care. But there's one story in particular, Israel Great March of Return, that I want to add context to, is that 42 knees in one day. Okay? So this is supposed to be an indictment of Israel and how like bloodthirsty, monstrous their snipers are or whatever. However, this is a tactic that we've talked about in this channel, where if somebody goes up to the border fence and they start trying to rip apart their border fence, then they use a .22 long rifle to shoot them in the calf or shoot them in the knee. That way, that person has to be removed from the field of play. We've talked about this in the past. So when he says, over 200 Palestinians were killed and nearly 8,000 were injured during almost 2 years of weekly protests at the Israel-Gaza border. So right here, the 200 Palestinians, I'm assuming that if I read the after action reports, they would say, oh, they had Molotov cocktails, oh, they had guns, oh, they had this, they were throwing rocks at people's heads, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it came to the 8,000 that were injured, I guarantee you it was people trying to take down the border wall or the border fence. However you feel about that. But I just want to clarify that it's not 8,000 people getting shot with 30-06 to the chest and then killing 8,000 people because they're involved in peaceful protests. It's 200 people who probably had weapons getting shot and killed. And then it's 8,000 people who were maimed with 22 long rifle so they would stop trying to tear down the border wall.
Time and time again. And over the course of the 20 years that I've been professionally, covering this, my attitude towards Israel's willingness to have peace has changed, and my understanding of it has changed. And I can only imagine how more intense that feeling is to be living in a place that is, functionally like, the Warsaw Ghetto, insofar as like you don't have access to resources, you have 50% unemployment, the apartheid that is taking place in terms of the West Bank. I mean,
I agree with those characterizations, by the way, Sam. Just to say,
but I can't imagine that my response wouldn't be to pick up a weapon.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not. Would you murder people, Sam? Because that's kind of the question. The one thing that Ethan is arguing against is murdering civilians and sexual assault. So this is one of the videos that I was talking about, where people show off how beautiful Gaza is before the October 7th and October 8th, like reprisals, which is fine, by the way. I understand that it could still suck to live in Gaza, but this is where I wish people would, come up with a consistent narrative. Okay. Gaza is so physically beautiful. Look at these cacti. Look at this apartment. Look at these marble floors. Look at this couch. Look at all these beautiful buildings. Look at this. Look at that. Right. And so I have no problems with the criticism of the sheer level of destruction. That's fine. That's the part of this that I'm perfectly willing to accept. However, look at this on the left-hand side. We got people walking around. We got cars driving down the street. We got shops. We have, people moving about the town. We got a central library. We got a hotel. We got dirt bikes. We got looks like 80s or 90s Volkswagens. And so it's like, dude, which is it? Okay. Is this an open air prison akin to the precursors to the Holocaust? Or is this like a relatively nice place that you're locked into and you have crazy high unemployment, but realistically, it's still like a physically beautiful place with a bunch of redeeming features? I would like to get a nailed down narrative into what Gaza was before the war.
No, it's not really working out.
Well, none of it's working out, is it?
No, not much at all. Not really much at all. It's called
the greatest attack on Israelis in 75 years. The notion of Zionism and the way that Israel is organized as a society is not protecting Jews.
Well,
it's not protecting Israelis. It's not protecting Jews worldwide.
Hold on, and this is bullshit. Sorry to rewind.
Called the greatest attack on Israelis in 75 years. The notion of Zionism and the way that Israel is organized as a society is not protecting Jews.
Well,
it's not protecting Israelis. It's not protecting Jews worldwide. It is, there may have been a time where...
This is like saying that the American military industrial complex doesn't fight on behalf of America because 9/11 happened. It's such a stupid way to analyze geopolitics. In war and conflict, obviously your enemies are sometimes going to get an advantage, and then just to be like, oh, that means that it never worked, is such a stupid, like, liberal progressive perspective on on conflict. Sorry to the liberals and progressives in chat, but it's the same thing with the Tet Offensive. Okay, so the Tet Offensive in Vietnam was what actually like soured the American people on Vietnam and made them question the narratives of how the war was going. Because the American media and the American government was characterizing the war as under control. And so the fact that North Vietnam was Tet Offensive successful So the Tet Offensive was a military defeat for North Vietnam and the Viet Cong as they failed to achieve their primary goals of instigating uprisings and inflicting heavy casualties on U.S. and South Vietnamese forces. However, it was a strategic victory for the communists in that it significantly impacted American public opinion and contributed to the eventual U.S. withdrawal from the war. So that's the thing, is people remember the Tet Offensive as this like crazy, insane, like victory for the North Vietnamese. I'll tell you the story behind this picture in a second, as like this crazy victory for the North Vietnamese, but they lost like tens of thousands of dudes and degraded their logistical capacity for like years to come. But because they embarrassed the American and South Vietnamese forces, it effectively soured the United States on continuing the war. And so like that's where like you have to be wary of anyone who says like, oh, October 7th it means that Israel is incapable of defending itself. Is Israel incapable of defending itself with the Iron Dome right now? Is it incapable of defending itself as it dismantled its military rival on the South and the North and the East almost instantaneously? Like, no, Israel is perfectly capable, but when you're in a conflict with people, you sustain casualties. It's such a stupid, childish perspective on like war and conflict. And this dude looks dope. Here's somebody's grandpa in Vietnam looking badass in a GI helmet. But all right, so this story, this photo is of a South Vietnamese police captain executing a North Vietnamese insurgent. But the truth is that this man ended up retiring and living in America and dying in old age. This man had just got done butchering a family on the local military base or the local police like base. Like the police officers and their families stayed on, you know, like in compound housing so they wouldn't be murdered. This guy and a bunch of guerrillas snuck into that compound and they slaughtered this guy's coworkers and their families. So the whole thing is like this picture was used by anti-war activists in order to show the brutality of war and the brutality of the South Vietnamese. But this guy actually was carrying out, in my opinion, a just execution of a barbarous monster. So anyways, the more you learn. Yeah, didn't help the image as well. The reporter always felt awful for it. Yeah, literally, I shouldn't say literally. Actually, if I remember correct, I think the reporter said that they publicized the picture because it was so iconic. But what ended up happening was it was used by anti-war protesters and it was used to malign that police chief so aggressively that they ended up regretting publishing the picture. It should be noted that the North Vietnamese were nearly as brutal as Hamas. They slaughtered 3,000 to 5,000 Vietnamese civilians after they captured Hue. Yeah. There were all sorts of stories coming out of Vietnam that were like the communists hated religion. And so when they caught Catholic missionaries in Vietnam, they would like rip out their tongues or torture them or murder them. And no offense, but if I hear that you like tortured or murdered a woman and you're a part of like a military organization that doesn't punish you for it, you know, I might take it personal and then start hunting down your military organization. Same way we did with Al-Qaeda, right? Because Al-Qaeda took part in 9/11. There's no redeemable part of Al-Qaeda. If a member of Al-Qaeda gets hit with a drone strike, no one cares because of what they participated in and because of what they glorify. The reporter said, what would you do if you found your friend and his kids massacred? But the privileged white kids like Sam never heard that part of the story because they don't care. Literally. Not literally. Actually correct. Yeah. I don't think Sam has been aggressed upon violently. Otherwise, I don't think that his takes would be sustainable.
Zionism had and there were certainly proponents of Zionism in the early 20th century, in the late, perhaps late 19th century, where there was a notion of a multi-ethnic democracy that fell by the wayside. Folks like Hannah Arendt and Einstein, left the Zionist Congress, and what it has evolved into is, I think, a nightmare for everyone involved. And so, I don't know how I would react in that type of immiseration, frankly.
Well, can I ask?
How would you react if you were an Israeli Jew, Sam?
But again, Ehud Barak said that he would pick up a weapon were he one of them. And
That's fine.
he's
You
far
know,
closer to the conflict than I.
Thank you for your sympathy, Sapient Green.
I'm not saying I don't understand why people pick up weapons, right? So let me ask you this: what do you think about October 7th attack?
What do I think about it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrific.
Mm-hmm. And this was like a military action by Hamas to what end?
I mean, I suspect. I mean, I don't know what the strategy was. I mean, they attacked 2 military bases. I don't know if they were aware of that the dance.
The Nova rave.
Listen, guys, I'm going to be a little mean to Sam right now, but this is how I know I have a future in media, okay? Because Sam's been in media for a long time. He's a voice actor. He has a show that, while it doesn't have like the craziest metrics, it's pretty acclaimed for being like a fair and intelligent and thought-provoking show, right? And yet here's, Sam Seder, one of the kings of debate on the left, if you're not talking about Destiny, and he's just like, what do I think about October 7th? And listen, we all have bad days. We all have days where we use more filler words than we like. We all have weird tics and audio sounds that we make with our mouths that are involuntary while we're communicating. But, this guy has been doing this for a decade and a half, 2 or 3 decades. He's being asked a question about a topic that he should be prepared for. And this man's probably made hundreds of thousands of dollars being a rhetorician for the left, right? So if that's true, and if all the other people that I've met in media are the way that they are, I think I'm going to do just fine, fellas. Speaking of which, chill time. Like the stream if you haven't liked it already. Comment for the comment gods. Leave your thoughts down in chat. I'm obviously engaging with them alternatively. Thank you already to the people who have donated. We've gotten a few donations already. If you have money burning a hole in your pocket, if you got paid recently, if you're interested in doing super chats, please do so. It is never required, but it is always appreciated, and it helps support the show and helps bring the content so we can show Valor Media Network and that this is a viable thing that people like and are passionate about, and support not just with their attention, but also with their money if they have it. Although I do understand the economy is rough out there. So if you're brokies or if your 401k is 50% down, don't worry about it. Well, QC John says, I think Sam sounds like the old creepy guy in Family Guy. No, you know who he is. He's Hugo from Bob's Burgers. I'll show you in a second. Possum Nation says, Connor, I don't know what the Americans did in Nam, but the French definitely did act in terrorist ways before the Americans got there, for what it's worth. They did the same in Algeria before that. They aren't shy about admitting it. Yeah, colonialism is brutal. I'm not saying that it's not. The Silver Dragon Man says, Sam's knowledgeable on some things, but honestly, I've never considered him to be very good at debate. Not sure where he got that rap. Probably debating stupid people. That's where he got that rap. But let's take a look real quick at, I just want to Google the character Hugo from Bob's Burgers, because if I play a clip, they're obviously going to copyright it. But there's a health inspector who is hot for Linda, and it's played by Sam Seder. And honestly, Sam Seder's voice, this is the spirit animal of Sam Seder's voice. So I think it works.
Yeah, I don't know if they knew that rave was happening. I suspect it was to derail the Abraham Accords, which were going to leave the Palestinians out of the equation, where an authoritarian
you leave out that they
state.
attacked kibbutzim, by the way.
No, yes, of course they did. But I'm saying that they. I don't know what the strategy was. On
okay,
part.
So what do you think? Like, would you expect the response of Israel would be to that?
I had no doubt on that day that Israel was going to respond.
Go insane.
I mean,
yeah, right. It was going to be horrific. We all knew.
Yes, but I think I think the lack of proportionality was just beyond. Frankly, and I was aware that this was going to be a horror show, but I don't think I had the level of awareness of what they would do to go in and literally level it, destroy what is it, 80-90% of the structures in Palestine, bomb hospitals.
So this is one of the dumbest concepts in lefty conversations about war. Okay. And I'm not saying that they can't make a different moral appeal. Okay. They can make a totally different moral appeal and I would accept it. Proportionality. Okay. So let's just look at the definition real quick. Definition: the quality of corresponding in size and amount to something else. Okay. The factor variable of quantitative. So in this world that Sam thinks would be more just, the Israelis, I know he wouldn't accept this because it's just a stupid talking point, but should Israel have just like marched into northern Gaza and then found 300 Hamas militants and then killed them and then found 900 Gazan civilians and then killed them and then called it a day? Is that what like Israel realistically should have done as a response to Hamas attacking it? Should they have killed the exact number of the people that were killed in Israel? Because that's like, chat's already agreeing with me. It's so dumb. Like it's a dumb idea. And he wouldn't even sign off on that, right? He'd be like, oh, why are you killing the civilians? They had nothing to do with the conflict. And it's like, well, you said proportionality. We need to be even, right? And so what? Then we have to kill exactly 1,200 Hamas militants, and then we have to stop all military operations. That doesn't make sense. Okay, it doesn't make sense at all. It only makes sense to morons who have never been in conflict, who don't read history, who don't pay attention to war. Okay, so with proportionality, I can concede that destroying 80% of standing buildings in Gaza is crazy pants. I don't agree with the way that IDF has conducted their military operations, but I'll give you the answer because I'm going to let them talk because they're going to go back and forth, and I don't think either one of them has a real answer. So in urban combat, in the second battle of Fallujah, okay, what we did, second battle of Fallujah. So the first battle of Fallujah, we basically did what Israel is doing in Gaza. We went in and we just started killing everybody. And if somebody was in our way, we just killed the hell out of them. So the second battle of Fallujah, we bombarded the entire city of Fallujah with pamphlets for 6 months saying, hey, if you don't want to get killed, get out, right? And we gave civilians the opportunity to flee for 6 months. Then at 6 months, we unleashed hell. And so we went door to door with grenades and tanks and support vehicles, and we just blew up everything. Like Fallujah was a mess. Let's watch this cute doggy while I talk about war crimes. And so as a result, that's something that I would have liked to see Israel do. I would have liked to see them skirmish with Hamas on the outskirts of Gaza, them pamphlet Gaza for 6 months saying, hey, go to Rafah. We won't kill you in Rafah. And then I would basically like to see combined infantry and mechanized Israeli divisions go through Gaza and clear it house to house and door to door and kill anyone who wants to fight. Now, the argument, though, is that gave the insurgents 6 months to prepare. So you are going to lose more soldiers by giving your enemy the opportunity to prepare. Now, the contradictory argument to that is the only people that you're going to end up killing are people who absolutely want to fight. You're not going to kill as many civilians. You're still going to kill civilians who either don't want to leave or who are being held hostage by the military faction. But if you give them 6 months to clear out, I think that's on them. And then also, if you're doing that door-to-door operations, you're going to lose more people. But those people who are sitting on the sidelines who are like, I would fight if they came now, but realistically, I'm kind of hungry and I want to go see my mom. Those people are not going to be hanging out in a siege in Gaza for 6 months. Only the most hardcore of the hardcore. And so in a perfect world, that's what I would like to see. Now, it's not a perfect world, but it is what it is. Silver Jacket Man says, maybe it's because I'm old enough to clearly remember 9/11, but that whole proportionality argument is ludicrous. After 9/11, Americans were howling for blood. Yup. No bomb shelters in Gaza, by the way. Nice government. Yeah, they actually said that there's some leaders of Hamas that'll say that the Gazan civilian casualties are a propagandistic win for Hamas. So they don't care if their civilians get blown up because God's going to judge them and send them to heaven or hell anyways. So it's not that big of a deal if civilians die. And realistically, it's a propaganda win for Hamas whenever Israel kills a civilian. Silver Jacket Man says, if you ask the average American if they would be okay with glassing the whole Middle East, after 9/11, yeah. After 9/11, there are people who unironically would have been perfectly okay if we turned Afghanistan to glass and if we turned Saddam's palace to glass. 100%. And then let Iraqis figure it out. We wouldn't have even been there. We just would have turned the entire thing into like a sea of radioactive rare earth minerals. Olafluja was a free fire zone in addition to using white phosphorus. Well, when you're talking about number 2, number 1 was worse because we didn't give civilians time to clear out. Big In Gaming says, if you want proportional, Hamas equivalent killing in one day is basically around 2,400 in 24 hours. To match that, Israel would have to kill almost 1 million in the year. Yeah, absolutely. Say what you want about AQI in Iraq, but they didn't intentionally use civilians as human shields the same extent that Hamas does. There's some bad things that AQI did that make me not want to agree with that statement, but I'll agree that Hamas is more prone to hide behind civilians. Parents, please don't trust a pit bull with your baby. Thank you. Yeah, well, that pit bull's cute, and it's a cute video, so we're just going to deal with it. Anyways, let's give them their talking time, but I just needed to point out how stupid that point was.
They would use
well, Hamas did know that because that's why they attacked.
Food as a weapon.
I'm more interested in the justification for what they're doing.
Probably
there.
Took
fair, Christian Blair is fair.
Hostages with the idea that they would be able to negotiate.
I understand why they took hostages. I don't understand why they took children and elderly.
I believe that they probably. I mean, this is all conjecture on my part. That they would be able to trade them as a way to inhibit Israel's doing what they're doing, and I don't know if they could have even imagined that. I'm not going I'm not going to endorse Hamas's strategy here.
Well, I'm just trying to flesh it out here because this is what I'm getting to is Hamas. I think they knew that this was the reaction that would happen. You know?
I can't imagine that they assumed that there would be this level of destruction.
I mean, that's why they hate Israel. I don't think they underestimate how violent the IDF can be. You know what I mean? That's why they attacked.
I certainly underestimated that they would go this far. Use
I didn't think they'd go this far, but
bomb hospitals and shoot EMTs and have.
So I want to explain this as well, because I'm never going to excuse like intentionally bombing a hospital and then bringing it down on people's heads. Okay. But we also need to understand the difference. So one of the hospitals that quote unquote got bombed was the same hospital where once IDF took it, they checked the CCTV and they found that hospital staff were helping to usher hostages into the tunnels underneath the hospital. So that's number one. Number two, if there's Hamas militants sitting in the parking lot and they get hit by a drone or they get hit by a bomb and the hospital itself is intact, that to me is not bombing the hospital, right? Bombing the hospital is putting a bunker buster or a JDAM through the roof and slaughtering the hundreds or thousands of people who are getting care in that hospital, and then, basically not caring and doing that, relatively speaking, intentionally. It's not hitting a dude in the parking lot and then some of the concrete cracks on the side of the hospital. That's not bombing a hospital, in my opinion. So it was not just a hospital. It was also a torture center and military outpost. I mean, I would have to look at the actual news stories to see what was going on. But yeah, I remember that there were news stories that came out after they took that hospital. They showed the CCTV footage of hospital staff working with Hamas militants in order to usher the civilians or the hostages through the hospital into the underground tunnel network. And then I remember the underground tunnel network having like power and ante rooms and water and all this kind of crap. So yeah.
Rules of engagement like this. I mean, and I think Hamas is certainly up to criticism for their strategy here. If
I think that's
what
an
you're trying to
understatement.
well, I mean, if that's
Well, I mean,
that's what
they're
you're
a terrorist
arguing. I think they
organization
probably
that intentionally
presumed-
antagonized like the IDF to come mass slaughter their civilians.
I think that they overestimated whether Israel cared about the hostages, without a doubt. I mean, there's I don't know that there would be anybody who would make a case.
Yeah, I'm sorry for pausing so much, but we are getting through a substantive chunk of the content. I was notified by a Valor rep that we are going to have to wrap up by 3:30 because there's another show going on. However, we'll still get through a majority of this content. So people are not arguing; they're talking about like whether or not a hospital can be legally targeted, right? And the thing that happened in early OIF that I know a lot of early OIF vets got frustrated by was mosques being used as weapons caches. And so what was happening was insurgents were going in and out of mosques all the time in order to get guns and bombs in order to fight coalition forces. But then if they could escape, they would escape, and then they would go put the weapons and bombs back in the mosque. And so when the Americans came to the mosque, they were actually using it like a safe base in a game of tag. And so when the Americans came to the mosque, the local civilian population were in an uproar and effectively rioted because the United States military wanted to go in and clear out the munitions. And so they had to stop outside of the mosque. They had to wait for interpreters to come. They had to get the interpreters to tell the entire riot to buzz off. And then they had to force their way into the mosque in order to confiscate all the munitions. And so the whole idea behind not bombing churches is not bombing civilians who are engaged in worship, because obviously that's not a good thing. It's not so bad guys and insurgents and guerrillas can hide their weapons inside a place of worship and then you just can't touch them. That's not the point. It's not a safe zone in a game of tag, but Iraqi militia were actually acting like that was the case. And the United States had to jump through some hoops in order to disabuse them of that notion. Using human shields is also illegal, so heinous that all responsibility for collateral damage is on the people. It goes back and forth. Once munitions or warfighters are stationed in said protected status location, said location loses its protected status. Allegedly, but especially in early OIF, because of the sensitivities of it, there were actually times that they didn't bomb the mosque or machine gun the mosque. They did get interpreters to break the riots and then go in.
That this is what was their plan have Israel respond in this way. That's absurd.
Well, and the same is true of I guess Israelis feel the same way. Like it was totally unprecedented. You know what happened. So maybe they didn't think that their mission would be as successful.
Okay. KCJ from LI says, yes, literally the deaths of civilians that are legal culpability is always on the people using the human shields. No, Connor, I'm not kidding. Look up the law. Casey, I agree with you from a legalistic perspective, okay? However, something that my Air Force veteran friend told me was that they had a collateral damage calculus for drone strikes where if a man, like a terrorist, was surrounded by sufficiently less civilians that they could do a strike, they actually had a math sheet on how many civilians they were allowed to kill. And so as a result, what ended up happening a healthy chunk of the time is that the way that they would confirm this person was where they wasn't just through drones, but also through like cell phones, communications, all that kind of stuff. Well, where do a lot of people use their cell phones? They use it when they're running around town, talking to friends, family, et cetera, et cetera. Where else do they use it? They use it at their homes. And so what would happen is you have a very narrow window where you can minimize civilian casualties, but oftentimes where you would minimize civilian casualties was when they were with their families, right? So they're playing with their kid in the front yard, talking on the phone about how they're going to do bad shit with the homies later. And then a hellfire blows up them playing with their kid, right? Now, regardless of whether or not you think that that is the least evil option available, I'll tell you, just, talking to my Air Force friend, it messed him up psychologically. Like watching a rebel who thinks that he's doing the right thing by fighting the American empire, playing with his kid, and then he unknowingly gets him and his kid killed. it absolutely scorched this dude psychologically.
As it was on the other hand.
Oh, I have no doubt that they did not think that they would that they would have been able to overrun that. I mean, I think we were told that the technology of Israel's fence, et cetera, was perfect and something we should emulate in this country. I mean, Trump was all talking about that, so I have no doubt that Hamas.
So Christian Valera says the legal issue was using those tactics in countries we were not legally allowed to operate in, like Pakistan. But that's the thing, Christian Valera says. Number one, I'm pretty sure the AUMF from 2001 gives Bush and gave the presidency the authorization to pursue jihadist terrorists wherever they were found. And also, I think that there was a legalistic argument with the state of Pakistan not being willing to go into Waziristan, which is like the mountainous western region of Pakistan where all the insurgents were. And so since the Pakistani government, which was also corrupt, and let's face it, they liked some of those militias, they were friends with some of those militias, since they didn't want to go to war with those militias in the mountains, that's why we did the drone strikes. And I think the AUMF covered it. I could be wrong, though. I'd have to talk to like a JAG lawyer.
Overestimated.
Or overestimate the IDF. Yeah, I got you.
What they would be able to, what kind of destruction they would wreak, and they underestimated the violence that Israel would perpetrate on Gaza. I don't know that anyone could have imagined that Israel would have engaged in this level of destruction and immiseration and bombing churches and bombing hospitals and blowing up universities and destroying the infrastructure. I mean, it's almost beyond belief.
So what?
Hold up. Christians are about that turn the other cheek shit, right? Christians will let you slap them in the face, and then they'll turn the other cheek to let you slap. So 9/11 happens. We get a little crazy with it. We get a little bit Old Testament. We do some Old Testament stuff. And then, we feel bad afterwards. And we're like, hey, the New Testament is a thing. Maybe we need to chill out. Maybe we need to be friends. Maybe we need to be friendly with, Muslim folks, right? But what you're forgetting is that Jews are exclusively Old Testament. So whenever somebody does anything to Jews that's Old Testament-y, they have no problems doing Old Testament style stuff. So the fact that Sam Seder thought that this was like somehow beyond the pale of like humanitarian secular humanism or whatever, that's totally understood. But you're not talking about that. You're also talking about the world in the post 9/11 world where America, according to Sam Seder, directly, he's wrong, but he said this, the United States directly killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. So why wouldn't this be part of the calculus for Hamas that Israel might not only respond militarily, but respond hyper aggressively?
So one thing that when I was talking to Hassan, and I'm just going to talk about his point, this is about him personally. When I asked him, because this is obviously the $1 million question, right? By the way, just there's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza?
There's not one public bomb shelter in Gaza?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I just think that's interesting. It's pretty fucked up, don't you think?
Do I think it's fucked up?
Yeah.
Well,
What he's asking is, do you think it's messed up that Hamas does not provide any kind of physical security to its own citizens and they actually don't care whether or not they live or die because the tunnel system is for their militants? That's what he's asking him. And then Sam's going to try to skirt away from it and say it's immaterial. Christian Blair says the IDF of 2024 to 2025 operating in Gaza now is better than 48 or 67 IDF. I agree with you, probably because there aren't body cameras and cell phones. So there would be like more murders, more deaths, more this, more that. However, let's be real, Christian Valeris, the IDF did level 80% of standing structures in Gaza, which is pretty messed up.
I'm not sure. I understand the point. Like,
do you
think anything would be standing anymore?
Well, bomb shelters are underground. I mean, they would definitely be a lot safer.
I've seen what happened to tunnels under hospitals.
Your statement is, so you say there were tunnels under.
Contra FTN says, or is it messed up that you have to live with a bomb shelter nearby? I mean, I do think it's messed up, but as an example, Brianna Wu and Kyla are in Israel right now shooting a documentary, and both of them had to take shelter because they were getting bombed, and they had bomb shelters to run to because Israel allegedly cares about its civilian population.
Hospitals.
Israel built the ones under the first one that they went into. They built it when they were occupying Gaza.
Are you so, and right, that's true of that one, but I mean they have a vast tunnel network, obviously, as everybody knows. But I don't care. I don't want to get into the weeds on this.
Yeah, what a crazy counterpoint, by the way. So he's bringing up like bomb shelters and tunnel systems, and then Sam's like, yeah, did you know that this one segment was actually built by Israel? And it's like, okay, isn't it estimated that they have like 400 miles of tunnels in Gaza? How many miles of tunnels do they have? How many miles of tunnels in Gaza? 500 kilometers, 300 miles. There's 300 miles of tunnels in Gaza. I don't think Israel built all of them.
The $1 million question is like, what can we do? Now it's obviously insanely difficult to say.
I think we can stop aid immediately. I mean, obviously it's not going to happen under Trump.
I'm in favor of that, by the way.
Okay. I mean, good.
I mean, I think
we should call for all aid to be ceased. And I think we should stop protecting them in the UN.
What should have Israel done on October 8th, I guess? Like, what would have been an appropriate response for their government?
I mean,
without saying not this.
What should they have done?
I already gave you my answer and summarized it. If you need to check out the tactics used, Fallujah 2. Okay, so there's the first battle of Fallujah, which is where we just went in and we did kill a shitload of civilians because if an insurgent shot at us, we just put a tank shell through the window and we didn't care if there were civilians in there. The Iraqi government said, hey, you're killing too many civilians. You need to slow down or stop. So we did stop, and then we gave them 6 months. We hit them with pamphlets. We told them to evacuate. They did evacuate. Then we went in and we cleared every single room in the city. So I would do Fallujah too. That's how I would do it.
On October 8th, I mean, I think that...
Big in Gaming says, General Chang said we should just send in the Zohan. Yo, Big in Gaming says, just kidding, use Special Forces. Yeah, but the Special Forces have their limits, okay? All of the movies about Special Forces biting off more than they can chew, Black Hawk Down, what is it, like Four Men or something like that, the Horseback Special Forces movie, there was the other one, what's the Navy SEAL one, Lone Survivor. All those movies are about SF guys thinking they're cooler than they are, and then them getting jacked up, but then killing 10 times their number of enemy, right? That's like the story. And that's also what happened in that hostage negotiation. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a hostage that got saved by Israeli special forces because they knew where they were. Well, what happened was while they were exfiltrating, their vehicles came under fire, and the Israeli Air Force dropped bombs on where the attacks were allegedly coming from. And they ended up killing like 200 people in order to recover like 1 or 2 hostages. Kind of insane. Both sides are evil. There is no good side in the Middle East. Well, I don't. I think we're all shades. I think we're all shades of good and evil here, brother. I don't think there's a perfect person in war. Black Hawk Down is full of BS. I would be curious to know what is full of BS. I think what was it? It was like 200 and some odd Americans killed and probably like 3,000 to 10,000 Somalis killed. I would like to know what you specifically think is BS about Black Hawk Down.
I think that there is they're hitting strategic sites to attempt to take out leadership. They should have. But let's talk. Like to
the
look
leadership
at that
was
moment,
underground.
Yeah, to look at that, that moment.
I think the leadership is also in a different country. They're in like Oman or some shit.
In history, like maybe it was.
I disagree because they had to do something.
Listen, maybe in that moment, they had to go in and bomb or whatever they do. I think that.
Madam Power says the movie was nothing but BS entertainment. Again, please explain how. Right? You have 2 crash sites. You have Somalis swarming the crash sites. You have American soldiers shooting tons of people. The KD ratio was supposed to be, approximately like 10 to 1. You do have lots of injured and killed American special forces. And then what ends up ultimately happening is there's such a gaggle of miscommunication that a platoon or like a squad has to evacuate by running several miles after they've already been in a firefight for like 2 days. So can you explain what parts of it are BS besides it's all Hollywood BS? All I saw was Rangers and Delta getting into a firefight with Somalis armed with RPGs, small arms, and technicals. So Christian Blair says, Black Hawk Down, the Rangers and Delta killed a lot more combatants than shown in the movies. They waste hundreds of Somalis. Yeah.
Any action that they would have taken at that point, frankly, was a function of literally decades of oppressing people and attempting to bring this to an eventuality.
Right.
I mean, this was.
So he's not answering the question, by the way.
This was.
And so what should they have done?
Ages ago. Well, I mean,
you're avoiding. Yeah.
Okay. I think what they should have done is begun empowering Palestinians in the West Bank. They should have done
this. Is
the
my
same.
favorite answer,
Okay.
Sam. You're saying that this is what Hassan told me. They should disband their government and lift the borders in response to the worst terrorist attack that's ever happened.
I think honestly, when you see that your policies have failed, but I don't think
you actually don't believe that that's a real thing, though. I'm interested in having like a real conversation. You can't like live in a fairy tale land where, in response.
So, Madam Power, thank you to your family service. The Somalis knew our unit was on its way because Night Stalkers were ordered in at dusk, not at night. My spouse was a Night Stalker, and we buried our friends who flew the Rangers in. Well, yeah. Wasn't that a substantive part of the problem? Was it was a daytime operation instead of a nighttime operation? I think that was one of the problems, right? Because typically it's, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a lot more difficult to resist American military forces when they have night vision. So a guy that, sorry, real quick story. Try to be brief because we do have to go in a minute, in 30 minutes. But the guy, I met a SF pilot, or no. He was an SF guy from Somalia. He wasn't a pilot. And he said that they like to go pig hunting in Somalia. And so they would, hunt from the helicopters. And then also one of the interesting things was they effectively, without needing to, they showed this guy the evasive maneuvers that the Black Hawk helicopter is capable of. And he basically said that the Night Stalkers pilots were so talented that at night they were effectively able to like bank 45-degree angles and then pull like 20 or 30 feet, bank 45 or like 90, I guess, into the opposite direction, and then pull 30 or 40 feet. And they just could do that over and over again. So it was like the world's craziest roller coaster, which I imagine a 19-year-old Ranger in a Black Hawk helicopter shooting out 45-degree angles to the earth and then banking 30 feet in a few seconds and then flipping and doing it over and over again. That's a pretty cool idea to me. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I was told.
So the worst military or terrorist attack of all time, Israel, who's already, as you state, like genocidal and racist and all these terrible things, is going to lift their borders and disband their government.
Wait a second. You're asking me what they should have done, and that's different.
No, in a realistic way, not in a fairy
to
tale, Sam.
Well, listen.
So MB says, hey, Connor, I have a few ideas based on your combo with the Cono Boy on Tim Pool. Do you have an email? I can send you some ideas. You have the time to view it if you wish. Sure. I'm going to type it into chat. It's counterpoints Connor, spelled with CONOR at gmail.com. If you want to copy it from the chat, go ahead. So. Madam Power says Wolcott Elvis was known for doing aerobatics with the MH60s that led to design mods on the birds. That's dope. That is dope.
There is no realistic thing. Their agenda has been, it has been quite clear. Their agenda has been, since Ariel Sharon walked on the Temple Mount and tried to scuttle peace talks, the agenda since the assassination of Rabin by arch Zionists in Israel, the agenda has been to bring about this moment. There is no doubt about it. The annihilation of the Palestinian people has been an agenda in Israel for far too long. So from the perspective, it's anything I say is fantastical relative to what they would actually do. Anything.
There's nothing they could have done that because of the situation, everything
No,
anything
I'm
they would have
saying
done
that
would have
this
been.
was, yeah, there was no plan that on this day they were going to do this. But if you go back 10 or 15 years ago and look into Bibi Netanyahu's brain, the idea that this is ultimately going to happen was definitely the agenda.
What, in terms of like
Find a
attacking
way,
Gaza or inciting an attack?
I would imagine both, frankly. But to find a way
kind of-
to eliminate the Palestinians, this has been the agenda of
So just to clarify what he's saying, because I don't know the validity of it. I think it's pretty cold-hearted, but I guess it's entirely possible. What Sam is saying is that they put the Gazans under such pressure that the October 7th terrorist attack was inevitable, and that the Israeli government as a whole actually wanted this to happen as a pretext for ethnic cleansing. So I would need to see some evidence for this. It can logically follow, but there's plenty of things that are logical. Like George Bush wanted revenge on Saddam Hussein for trying to kill his dad. That there's infinitely more complex geopolitical explanations for what's going on besides like vendetta or vengeance. So I find I'm skeptical of the claim that Israel wanted 1,300 of their people slaughtered so they would have a casus belli to invade Gaza. I would need to see more evidence than just saying Sam Seder of the Majority Report says so.
At one time, what I think was a smaller segment of the Israeli body politic, and I think has increasingly become an even larger portion of the Israeli politic. So, I mean, anything I say in terms of should is fantastical. Anything.
So, yeah, okay. I mean, so this is like I understand where you're coming from, right? Like
there was an opportunity.
Big in Gaming says that this is contradicted by an internal Israeli report that says they expected at most a few hundred people, like 70 people, he's saying. A few dozen people, I guess, is the best way to say that, to get across and then maybe do like a limited terrorist attack. They were not expecting this because they were so focused on developments in the West Bank. I don't know if that's true. That's just being said, and it makes sense. Maybe they did, but ultimately Hamas got handed their golden ticket. The IDF doesn't have mind control devices. Probably. They thought Hamas was being good, which is what Sinwar wanted to allow them to pull on the sneak attack. Interesting. Cucking for Israel when you have no connection is wild. Everyone has to take a side. Fuck them both. Okay. Don Dota, I'm not going to compel you to care about these countries. But if you want to watch the content, then just don't be rude and we'll be okay.
For a ceasefire that was called in November, in December, they could have held a ceasefire at any point, and the amount of killing would have been far less. They could have done that. They could have ended it after a week.
I mean, Hamas could have ended the war anytime too.
How could have Hamas ended the war?
By releasing the hostages?
No, listen. Israel has said time and time again that the release of the hostages is not going to end their assault on Gaza. They have said this over
I don't believe that's
over and over.
I haven't seen those statements. I've seen the opposite. I believe that
you really haven't seen those statements?
No, I haven't. I'll review them. I mean, it depends when it depends when they were made too, right? Like, what's in response to?
At any time they could have done that.
Well, what has Hamas done to end the war?
Hamas offered
what have they done to end the war?
Early on to say Hamas offered all the hostages in agreement in response to Israel not coming into Gaza. I mean, there's just to defend.
So hold on. I want you to think about how crazy that is. So Mexico goes across the border into the United States, slaughters 1,200 people, kidnaps another 300, retreats back into Mexico. And then when the United States military is prepping to invade Mexico, they say, hey, we'll give you the 300 hostages back as long as you don't come into Mexico. Why would that ever be considered by Israel? Like, you would need unconditional surrender and all of the people who participated in the attack to be handed over on a silver platter. You would effectively need, like, I don't know, I guess it's few hundred, few thousand, right? You would need like a few thousand Hamas militants handed over to the Israeli government for incarceration or the death penalty. This is, I do think that I and Ethan, or Ethan and I, we might be too naive. We might think that the Israeli government isn't as manipulative as it is. However, I think Sam is woefully naive about a government accepting that. That's crazy. Okay. Don Dota. I like how, dude, you're gonna get banned just because you're annoying. I like how Israel expanding its borders for the last 60 years is never a subject. Just ignore the original agreement. All right, we're gonna do a geopolitical analysis because Don Dota has prompted us to. So 60 years. Let's see. Calculator. It's 2025. Let's get an exact year for this. 2025 minus 60. So that's 1965. Wars of Israel timeline. So you got the establishment of 48. I think you got 67 borders. That's the one that they always argue about, right? The 1967 borders. 48, 29, 39, 48, 50, 64. Okay, so 67. What did we say? 65. So I'll go ahead and start from the PLO was founded. All right, so the PLO was founded in 64. The 6-Day War, West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. That's against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, who all attack simultaneously. Then they give some of the territory back that they won in warfare. Then you have the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack during Yom Kippur. They also get their asses kicked. Then Egypt normalizes relations. 82, the Lebanese are attacking, and blowing stuff up inside of Israel. So Israel invades Lebanon. Then we have the Intifada. So the point is that if you want to say like, oh, they've been expanding their borders since like 67 or 65, excuse me. Okay. Well, the greatest expansions came because people attacked them. So, While you're getting one guide, can you post a Discord link? The one on your 40K channel is expired. Sure. Let me do it.
Not true.
Israel's actions.
That didn't happen
as
either.
being inevitable. Like, when do you think they should have ended it? When do you think they should have ended it?
So who have ended what?
You've asked me the question, what should have Israel done? You tell me what they should have done. Do you think what they've done is right?
Well, I've clearly stated no, Sam.
Okay, so tell me what they should have done.
Yeah.
But
so, I mean, obviously, hindsight is a beautiful thing. But in my opinion, like you said, I think some more specific strikes, I think more moving slowly, because as you kind of pointed out, but didn't really acknowledge.
When do you think they should have ended?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the leadership is obviously underground.
I like how Ethan does this to Hasan too, where they start interrupting him while he's talking. And then he's like, do you want me to answer or not? If you want to keep talking, you can keep talking, which I think is just like a big balls move, because you're effectively pointing out that the other person is being a dickhead while asking you to answer something. Whoever's I'm sorry, somebody was asking me for a Discord invite, but I'm in streamer mode, so it's not showing me the link. Just DM me on Twitter at CounterConnor, CounterConor. DM me there or shoot me an email, counterpointsconnor@gmail.com. I'll get you a link. We have a lot of back end work to do, but to be honest, we need to make, in the next 6 months, we did get an editor for Valor. We should be getting it up and running, so my home channel will be bringing in a substantive amount of revenue in the next 6 months. And if we're bringing in a substantive amount of revenue in the next 6 months, then at that point we can kind of hire people to do the back end work that's needed on Discord, merchandise, community stuff, all that kind of stuff. We just don't have a lot of extraneous income because the majority of my income goes to living expenses. So not 60, 65. Okay. And my point still stands. 5 years doesn't make a difference.
So it's going to be a long mission of trying to get them. It's going to be a difficult mission.
Well, it's not just that. So let's say that we did Fallujah too, and then we destroyed all of Hamas, or we destroyed a vast majority of Hamas. Then at that point, you would effectively do, in my opinion, if this was like just in any capacity whatsoever, you would effectively do nation building. Gaza is only the size of Detroit. We're not talking about rebuilding all of Iraq or rebuilding Afghanistan. We're talking about rebuilding one major city. So why wouldn't you incrementally start building in North Gaza, build like secure, good water, good electricity, good access, like a good grid, water purification, all that kind of stuff. Eliminate all the material concerns that Gazans might have and for their justification, and then let them move in there. And you're like, oh yeah, well, you know, the workers and the Israelis would be getting attacked. Yeah, but if you eliminated all their material complaints about living in Gaza, then I think that would be a sufficient argument that you could turn around and say, hey, we actually are the good guys. Yeah, sure, we killed a shitload of people and we killed a shitload of Hamas militants, but we effectively made Gaza better than when we annihilated it. And now the Gazans are better off.
But I think militarily, they probably have some obligation to their citizenry, at the very least, to like take out but we're ignoring the fact that missiles are being shot into Israel nonstop. And I know you're going to say, you know, Iron Dome stops most of them, which is true. But at the same time, I mean, a country needs to respond to that. They can't just allow missiles to be shot in.
Tell me the non-fantastical version of what they should have done. Should have been 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How many Hamas leaders, how many members of Hamas should they have killed before they leave? Because we know
all of them
that Blinken said on his way out that virtually every Hamas member of Hamas that they've killed has probably been replaced by.
Well, contra FDN, you can say that that's silly. Can't rebuild Detroit, but going to rebuild a nation across the pond. Well, when you elect me dictator of America, I will rebuild Detroit as well.
Someone who's lost a family member or an entire family or whatnot. So you tell me, Ethan, if you're the one with the.
There's a KFC in Yemen. You know I've been watching too much Nick DiOrio, bro. Gaza just needs some McDonald's and KFCs. Bro, you're not wrong. The Kuwaitis are very happy. They're very obese, and they're very happy because they have a KFC and a McDonald's and a Pizza Hut and all that stuff. In Kuwait, I think that going out on a Friday night, they don't drink, they eat fast food. And I understand that some people think that's dystopian. I think it's kind of wholesome. I think it's kind of wholesome that instead of like going out and getting wasted and trying to have promiscuous sex and all that kind of stuff in Kuwait, you get dressed up in your finest, it's hot as hell outside garb. The wife gets dressed up in her, hijab, and you guys go out on town, you go to the local mall, and then you eat some Mickey D's or some Pizza Hut at the local mall. I think that's actually dope. I think that's cool as hell. So I get it. They're getting fat. They're dying from heart disease, all that kind of stuff. But realistically, like your ancestor 100,000 years ago, if he was like, hey, great grandpa, your options are you get mauled to death by a saber-toothed tiger, you die pooping yourself to death after you ate a bad mushroom, or you die because you ate too much fast food. I'm pretty sure your great grandpa from 100,000 years ago is obviously going to take dying from too much food. Obviously.
Sensical perspective on this, and mine is fantastical. What should they have done that would have been appropriate in your mind?
Yeah. So besides like special operations and stuff, I think it would have been a good idea to, I think there's a space where they could like try to find peace partners in Gaza before just destroying the whole thing. Like obviously they approached it completely wrong, right? But there are ways I think that could have happened that are realistic, like trying to forge some kind of peace partner, some kind of alliance, some kind of international coalition.
People were marching. They were marching. They were marching in the Great March of Return, week after week after week.
Sam, was there Hamas activity at the Great March?
Sinwar was marching. Sinwar was marching with them.
Were people attacking the border wall?
During the Great March of Return, the first dozens of these things before the snipers. No, they weren't.
I think we're good. I think they're going to fight back and forth. We only got like 10 minutes left on the stream, and I'm pretty sure that it's all the same stuff, right? Actually, let's go to, oh, no, recapping is them when they're talking as a crew. Right. So we get the point. Sam is a shill. It's not anything personal. You know, he feels very passionately about what he feels about. So I'm not going to dog him, right? But I think that he's wrong and silly, and I think that he has
And that's
very
where-
silly perspectives when it comes to warfare. So, you know, just because he's a 40-year-old who's socio-politically relevant as an alternative media commentator doesn't mean that he's particularly insightful. I would never doubt his intelligence. I think that Sam is probably very likely very intelligent, but I think he hangs out with people who are not particularly deep. He probably has an audience that isn't particularly deep as well. And so as a result, I think he's, you know, saying things that aren't very deep and aren't very insightful. And so as a result, I think it, you know, decreases the quality of what he has to offer the world because he's effectively offering things that I think are silly. I think what he just said is very silly. Now, I parasocially love you. Shill. Please remember to like the stream, chat in chat, leave comments, and do super chats if you have a whole, money burning a hole in your pocket. I understand that for the wages, you are probably broke because the economy sucks. And I understand for the rich people, your 401k is probably taking a hit. But if you have money burning a hole in your pocket, super chats are never required, but are always appreciated. We did have a couple of donors today. We did have Celeste Plantagenet, Yoch, given a donation. And we had Sapient Green given a donation as well. Thank you to our very kind donors this stream. And then what I would say is, unfortunately, I have to run. So I did skip out on 90 minutes of content today, but it's because my wife had a doctor's appointment this morning. And there's about to be a Game Within episode that's going to kick off at 3:30. So I do need to kind of wrap up so I can give them some time to set up and get in there, though. So what I would say is I parasocially love you. Thank you for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the content. Come back and see me tomorrow. I should be here at 9:30. I don't think I have anything scheduled for tomorrow. So I should be here from 9:30 to 2:30, and we'll go ahead and launch the Hasan Piker segment. Also, if you want to catch VODs, we will be posting them to the main Valor Media channel network, but we're trying to get the new editor spun up and running. And then we'll also be posting VODs to my channel as well. But of course, because we have a backlog of content and segments, we need to start cutting that up. But I have a plan to expedite that. So I am sorry that there's some hiccups when it comes to creating content, getting monetized, cutting up segments, all that kind of stuff. But I do parasocially love you guys that we started at, I don't know, we started at like 10 live viewers the first day. We got up to 50 within, a month. And this is just the beginning. This is the very beginning. And we already have fun and we already have a great time every time we go live. So parasocial love to you and yours. I blame Emma Vigeland. Sam was better before she showed up, I swear. Yeah, probably. If you hang out with progressives all the time and you never challenge them, it could be a problem. Have a great day, y'all. Thank you, Sin Patty. Appreciate you. Contra FTN, have a great rest of your day. Thank you kindly. Take care, Connor, in chat. That's Nang Un. Thank you kindly, Nang Un. And then Sacred Snow says, Guzzling Buckets. I did see your email. I will respond. His best debate, in my opinion. True. Sam couldn't have been that better given his former co-host was just an anti-Israeli. It happens. It happens. But I'm going to run. Parasocial love to you and yours. Dr. Zayas, good to see you. Christian Valeris, good to see you. Raymond Smith, good to see you. Casey from Long Island, always good to see you. Big in Gaming, thank you for all the passionate comments. Harmonic Fox, you are one of my most loyal soldiers. Silver Jacket Man, you're the best. Sapient Green, thank you for the dono. Miss Celeste Plantagenet, Yoch, thank you for your donation. It is all very much appreciated. Jonah Boy, good to see you as well. Have a great day. Conserve liberalism, parasocial love. Well, QC John, parasocial love to you as well. Bye for now.